Well, hi, everybody. My name is Jeannie Castine, and I am the executive director with Secular AZ, and I've been proud to call that my position now for the past just over 2 years. Um, I just want to say hello to everybody. This is so exciting. You know, this is the first secular summit that has happened in a in-person hybrid kind of way since since COVID. So it's nice to be able to get together and see all of you. I will tell you, we have a jam-packed program today. In case you didn't get this, the theme today is about rural communities and how evangelical extremist policies affect rural communities the most. All right, so let me stay on script because I have a habit of like getting off script. So let me stay on script. But if you are in this room right now or joining us online, you understand that white Christian nationalism is the greatest threat to our democracy. You're here because you're fully aware of how attacks against reproductive justice, public education, the LGBTQ community, and people of color directly tie to white Christian nationalist ideology. Your attendance here today and your ongoing engagement to combat this ideology at every level is vital to preserving our democracy as we know it. And that may sound hyperbolic to some of you, but NPR recently reported that 40% of Americans approve of an authoritarian form of government. 4 out of 10 Americans approve of an authoritarian government. I mean, number 45 just recently said that he would be dictator on the first day, and many of his followers are perfectly fine with that. So this is not a drill. So buckle up, secular fam, because we have some really incredible speakers and, like I said, a tight schedule. So I am going to go ahead and get to some brass tacks. For those of you who are here in person, there's a few housekeeping points. The bathrooms are back there. There's food in the back. Please, if we even have a chance to get to questions, which I'm not really sure of, be sure that you speak into microphones so that the folks who are joining us online can hear your thoughts and questions. And that goes for the speakers who are here too. If you do have something to say in the virtual world, please go ahead and put it in the chat. And I know Lindsay and Kat will be handling that. I must start by thanking the Humanist Society of Greater Phoenix for allowing us to use this space, and a special thanks to Catherine and Roger for helping us. I came here about a week ago, and they helped troubleshoot the technology. To the tech guy whose name I've already forgotten, I really apologize for that. My bad. And Mars de la Torre for their constant contact and cross promotion of events, and for setting up a service project today. Mars, yes, go ahead, give Mars a round of applause. Mars has also corralled all of us atheist, agnostic, humanist, and secular cats over the past year so that we may actually meet monthly now to support each other and to promote events, because the secular movement is growing not only in Arizona, but in the entire United States. I'd also like to thank the board of directors, and I think at this point, I think there might be some slides here where we're gonna talk about, if you wanna go to the, oh, I can do that. I'm sorry, I'm right here, hello. Hey, look at me, I can do stuff. Got that? All right, forgot all about that. I wanna say thank you to all of our Secular Summit sponsors. If you're a sponsor today of this event and you're here, please stand up so we can give you a big round of applause. Thank you. We wouldn't be able to do this work without you all. I want to express gratitude to Whit Johnson, who is our current president. He's sitting back there. But also, we've been able to welcome some new board members. Chris Ambry, if you're, I know she's here. Do you want to go ahead and stand up so everybody can see you? And I just got to shout out Chris, because Chris is an assistant principal of a school district that has really been on the receiving end of some vitriol from these white nationalists, you know. So thank you, Chris, for stepping up and being brave and being a member of our board. Craig Beckman, who's not here, he actually ran for the Deer Valley board, missed it by that much. Ian Hamp is also joining us virtually today. He's our vice chair. Suzanne Story. Oh, Suzanne's not here today. That's a shame. Suzanne is another educator, and some of you might remember her from 2020 when she ran for the County Board of Supervisors. And then, of course, we have Kaylin Thompson, who is supposed to be here. I haven't seen her yet. So anyway, I feel like I'm already running out of time because that's what I do. So welcome, everybody. And our first speaker today, is Jess all set to go, Kat? Is Jess online with us? All right. So let me go ahead and introduce Jess. Again, our theme today is rural communities and how evangelical extremist policies affect rural communities. Jess is a mother to 5, a grandmother to 3. Look at how young she looks, my goodness. And lives on a small farm on the Missouri-Iowa border. She was born and raised in rural America. She received degrees in English and teaching from the University of Arkansas and was an American literature teacher for 16 years. After the 2016 election of Trump, Jess became politically active. She ran for office in 2022 for state representative in HD1 in Northwest Missouri, where I believe like it's a 20-point lead of the Republicans. So for Jess to step up is really incredible. She was not successful, unfortunately, but she used the experience to organize progressives in rural Missouri. Jess is the executive director for Blue Missouri and hosts a weekly podcast called Dirt Road Democrat, which can be found wherever you listen to podcasts. I will also say, even though I hate Twitter and Elon Musk and all that, her Twitter is fire. So if you're still on Twitter, she takes down Republicans on the regular, and I can't get enough of it. So without further ado, let's go ahead. I'm sorry to be late, but let's welcome Jess Piper. Thanks, Jess.
Hello, I can't see myself. Can you see me?
Not yet, but we're
Okay.
getting there, I'm sure.
No worries.
We can see you.
I'd rather see her. Can we do that? I'm sorry. Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry if I was unclear.
Okay. So should I speak? Are you ready for me?
You know what? Since we're on a tight schedule, we'll see your beautiful face here in a minute, but go ahead and talk to us. Yeah.
Okay, well, thanks for the introduction. Oh, it looks like I'm coming up now. I'm so excited to see everybody in Arizona. It looks like you've got a little bit of cold weather too. I saw some coats in the room. But thank you for having me. Like you said, I was a teacher for 16 years. I never planned to do anything different than to teach the rest of my life. In 2018, Missouri passed a full abortion ban. And, it made me angry. So I knew my representative and I emailed him and I didn't hear from him. And then I called him and then I wrote again. And then I wrote a post about him and tagged him. And then I talked about him on Twitter. And then he had written a letter to our local paper. And I live in a very small town, by the way. My town is 480 people right on the Iowa line. And I outed myself because I said, you know what, Alan, you are never going to need an abortion, but there are lots of folks in your district who do. And so as a teacher, I wrote a letter telling him that, women should have access to abortion. He never contacted me. And that irked me. I mean, I'm used to it, but this was a big deal, I thought. So I was sitting on the couch one day and my husband was sitting next to me. And I said, you call Alan. And he was like, I don't want to. I said, call Alan. So he did. And within 20 minutes, my husband had a phone call back. And I said, well, it's just legislative aid, they'll take your message, whatever. And he said, no, it's Alan. And I said, well, tell him to call me. And he did. And I was hot. I was mad. So as soon as I got on the phone, I told him how I felt. And he said, listen, I don't have to talk to you. And the reason I called you was out of a favor to your husband. And I think I probably passed out. That really lit a fire underneath me. I'd never felt, that sort of misogyny before. And then the 2020 election rolled around. I went to vote for Joe Biden, and I did not have a Democratic nominee on my ballot to vote for. So I went home and I was like, if nobody else is going to do it, I'm going to do it. And I did. And I was able to raise more than anybody in the entire state in some tiny little district, in BFE, nowhere. And it's because I decided that I wasn't just going to run. I was going to try to win, and I was going to say the things that needed to be said, and I was going to be truthful with people and say the word abortion in rural spaces and say that we have to save education by keeping the privatizers from coming in and doing what they're doing to our schools. Talking to folks, knocking on doors and telling them that, and you guys probably know this. I knocked on doors in rural areas where people, everyone from their sheriff to their, um, senator, representative, coroner, prosecutor, everybody was a Republican. And I would knock on the door and talk about schools and roads, and they'd say, well, the Democrats, friends, what Democrats are you talking about, right? So this was a thing, and that started my run. I didn't know if you wanted questions or you wanted me to just to keep going because I got a
I
lot.
mean, we could, I would love for you to, we could ask questions. If there are folks who have questions, that would be fine. But also, I would love to hear some of the anecdotal stories that you have, Jess, about like reaching out in addition to that one, because some of the interactions that you have with some of these people is really interesting. And I believe is it your Secretary of Education, your state superintendent, who's the one that wants there to be religious schools everywhere? Is that Oklahoma? I can't remember.
That is Oklahoma, but
Okay.
as you know, whatever happens in one red state comes to another because I mean these are boilerplate bills. They aren't written by my legislators or Oklahoma legislators. They're written by, the Federalist Society. They're written by Betsy DeVos's organization, ALEC, that sort of thing. But as far as like hearing stories, the first thing that I'll say, and it's pretty relevant since I'm speaking to the secular society when I would knock on doors and talk to people, I mean, a lot of people had never heard from a Democrat. They don't know that they know Democrats. And so then when they would see me, they'd be like, this wasn't what I was thinking you were. I don't have horns. um, but I would hear people say, you sound like a nice person, but I can't vote for you because I'm a Christian. And the first time I heard it, I was born and raised an evangelical. I grew up in the Southern Baptist Church. I've been saved more times than I have fingers on my hands because I was scared of hell. But um, it almost knocked me down. It almost took my breath away when people said that. But after you hear it a dozen or more times, you realize that it really is a thing, that people think they can't vote for certain parties because they're Christian. And there is where I realized that the power of churches in small communities. So, like I said, I have a tiny community. The Democrats aren't here. They haven't been here in a long time. My district has never elected a woman. We have not elected a Democrat in 32 years. So, when I was talking to people, I was the first progressive message that many of them had ever heard in their entire life. Um, so, when the Democrats pulled out, the Republicans did too. They don't have to be here to campaign because they're already here. They're organizing in churches. And so they already have this built in, activism where Democrats do not.
And can you talk a little bit about the effects of some of these evangelical extremist policies with regards to education specifically in the state of Missouri? What are things like there for not just a rural educator, but any educator in the state of Missouri?
They're bad. We're 50th, we're rated 50th in the nation for starting teacher pay. Our starting teacher pay is $27,000 a year. Most districts will do more than that. My district, those teachers start around $33,000 a year, which after they take out teacher retirement, you have people with bachelor's degrees trying to get by on $1,400 a month. It's bad. Our schools have been defunded. We're 49th in the nation for educational funding, and so we just have a revolving door of brand new teachers. And no shade at brand new teachers because I was one as well. But when you have buildings full of people who haven't been teaching for more than 5 or 7 years, it's really problematic. Because of the defunding, 30% of the schools in Missouri now run a 4-day week. And a lot of people say, "Oh, that sounds fantastic." Not if you're in poverty, not if your parents work 5 days a week. These kids are watching each other on Mondays, and we don't go to school on Fridays because that's for football. Um, so Mondays are off. And when they're in high school, they go to work. And if you guys don't know, this was Betsy DeVos said this was the plan for rural spaces a long time ago. She was asked about school choice, and a reporter said, "What does that look like in a rural community?" And she said, "Well, I envision a kid could be working in the fields and have his headphones on, and when he's done working in the fields, he can go to a John Deere factory and work with an AI team, which that's 3 hours for me in Iowa somewhere." And then when he's done with that part of his working day, he can come home and maybe find a private tutor to help him with the rest of his classes. But every one of you were listening to that, and you heard that she means for rural kids to be at work, right? That's where they're going to be.
There's yeah, I mean, there's no coincidence, first of all, that the Speaker of the House said that, right, that all women should be, it should be expected to birth one worker or something like that, right? Like we've got some of these, I think it's Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who, by the way, Jess Piper trolls on the regular, which I love. But Sarah Huckabee Sanders said, wants more able, but like they're lowering the age of employment requirements. Like they're really just essentially getting the proletariat ready is kind of how I feel for a lifetime of work. So just as you know, we are ground zero for privatization here in Arizona. In 2022, we passed, well, the Republicans of the state passed sweeping legislation that would open up our voucher system to absolutely everybody. So I want to know, in Missouri, where are you all with regards to the privatization movement?
So I am really paying attention to what happened in Arizona. And I think every one of these states can look at Arizona and see what has happened. You guys have a $900 million hole blown into your budget because of the voucher system. And we know that vouchers are coupons for people who already have their children in private schools. And so right now in Missouri, we have ESAs, which is the very beginning of, a full voucher system. But I already know they've already pre-filed the bills that they're going to push for universal vouchers, which is the same thing that you guys have in Missouri, and it will absolutely decimate schools that my daughter attends. Rural kids are going to be, I don't know what is going to happen because we're already not funding schools or teachers. But the big thing is to remember is this. There is an organization in Missouri called the Herzog Foundation, and their entire mission is to catalyze um, Christian education. And they're millionaires, almost billionaires. They're right on the line. The entire thing has to do with Christian nationalism, and we know this. We know because Milton Friedman, who created vouchers, to keep white kids from having to go to school with black kids after Brown v. Board, he said this part out loud as well. He said, those who cannot afford an education will get a rudimentary education. And then the rest of the kids, when you're done with that sixth, seventh grade level, they're going to go to work. We are fighting the same fights that my great grandparents fought to be able to go to school past eighth grade. It is outrageous. It's just like, fighting for bodily autonomy that my grandma, fought for. And so all of these things are just coming back, and it has everything to do with Christian nationalism.
Okay, because we have such a tight schedule, we got about 5 minutes left. Is there anybody here in the audience who would like to ask Jess a question? You want me to just keep talking then? Okay. Jess, okay. Oh, we got one. Yeah, Brian, go ahead. Is there a microphone that we could share with Brian? It's not on.
Thank you so much for all your amazing hard work, initiative, and effort.
Yes. Woo!
And all the places you expend energy. Thank you so much. My main question is, have you seen or found anything across this great land that would be or is being successful in fighting back against this?
To me, I think what brings me hope and what makes me hopeful for the future are the kids, the younger generation, because they absolutely want bodily autonomy. They care about the climate. They want schools to be free and fair for everybody. So when I travel, and a lot of people will say, can you change the mind of someone who voted for Trump? Nope. And I'm not wasting my time doing it either. I absolutely will not do it. I have tried it a couple times. You know, when you're walking around and you have that list and you know, your voter access network and you're knocking on a door. And what would happen to me is I would feel confident because I just had two good doors, right? And if you're in a district like me, you can't just talk to Democrats. You have to knock doors for Republicans too. But I got off list and I knocked a door that I shouldn't have. And the man came out and he said, I would never vote for someone who, you know, believes in legalizing abortion. I said, well, here's the thing. We had a Missouri lawmaker last year that wrote a law against women having ectopic pregnancies. Like he would kill women with ectopic pregnancies because he doesn't understand biology. And that man at that door told me this: if a woman dies from an ectopic pregnancy, that's God's will. And I'd never heard anything like that. And I was like, well, I mean, would you say the same thing to a cancer patient? Like, what's wrong with you, right? But I knew in that moment that people in that mindset, I cannot change. So I work to register new folks and to get people, those that are apathetic, off, you know, off the couch. You got to get here. These things are happening to you and they're going to impact you. So that's where I find hope, is working with the kids, you know. And frankly, being in a red area, we have a super majority. We have, you know, no Democratic lawmakers. They don't even have to show up to work to pass bills. And so I often tell people, and I just remind them, they have been in charge for 2 decades, friends, 20 years. They want to talk about failing schools. Who's responsible for that? They want to talk about these roads that are falling apart. Who's responsible for that? You don't have access to healthcare. You don't have bodily autonomy. Who is responsible for that? And so I always reiterate, I tell them the problem, show them, you know, who is, you know, at fault. And then I try to make a conversation. But I'm not currently running and I don't have to be as nice right now. So if you follow me on Twitter, I'm sorry, I can say what I want.
And that's one of the reasons, you know, you're one of the reasons why I haven't fully given up my Twitter yet, you know, because yeah, between
It's
you and a few other
accessible.
activists, I just love the consistent takedown. But you know, your logic unfortunately falls on deaf ears, and you took away my closing question. Is there any way that we could convince you to run again?
I may run again in the future, but right now I'm working with Blue Missouri, and so I'm executive director for that organization. Our sole mission is to fund down ballot candidates because there is no funding for people. I mean, people think that Democrats support candidates. They absolutely do not, right? A lot of times candidates are sending money to them to have access to things, and so my mission right now, I was able to raise a lot of money, and so I found out that I can do that, and so now I'm trying to help others at least be able to pay for literature or signs.
Right on. Yeah. Well, I appreciate you so much, Jess. It was my absolute pleasure. I got to meet Jess in Washington D.C. where you were at the Network for Public Education conference. Again, it's on the screen. You'll see in a second. But she has a podcast called Dirt Road Democrats with another guy named Rob Rogers. I met him too. They're fantastic. So I just want to say thanks so much, Jess, for everything that you do. We appreciate you showing up to our little event today, and we wish you the best. Thank you.
Thank you, friends. Thank you, friends. You got this.
All right, so if we could go back to the slideshow real quick, that would be great. Let me see. I'm going to do this because I know how to do things. All right. I do want to go ahead and we do, like I said, have some of our liaised secular groups here. So if we could go back to the slideshow. But one of them that is actually going to help us with some of the leftovers today is Atheists Helping the Homeless in Phoenix. And Sheila, I don't know if you want to take a few minutes to share or what you'd like to, or do you want me to just go ahead and? Okay, great. Yeah, there's a slide. We'll get to it. This is what so this is a 501c3. I don't know if y'all have noticed, but a lot of these kind of like do-gooder organizations, right? They're religious, right? I know a lot of you probably do year-end giving, right? Where you look at the qualified organizations. So many of them are religious. The foster organizations, so many of them are religious. These other charitable organizations. Sheila isn't quite set up to be able to get those tax deductible donations from y'all, but I think she's going to be working on it for 2024. So this is a group that saw a need and said, you know what? Atheist people care about our unhoused neighbors as well. And so I'll read it now. Our team of volunteers sponsor giveaways on the first, third, and fifth Saturdays of the month. We work in the Hance Park area in downtown Phoenix. We distribute hygiene items, toiletries, Bombas socks, and some basic clothing. All items are donated via drop-off donations, Amazon wish list. They have a Facebook page where you can find them, and of course they take cash donations. And Sheila actually joined us. We had a whole series of a Friday speaker series where we were talking about secular approaches to homelessness. And so that's on our YouTube channel. I definitely encourage you to take a look at it because I certainly learned a lot. But back then, Sheila, you talked about the need for volunteers over the need for the supplies. Is that still the case for you? Okay, so I know that there's a lot of great service projects that Mars and others organize here, but there are also service projects with Atheists Helping the Homeless. So you've got her live and in person. If you want to get more involved with them, this is your opportunity to do so. Let's see, I want to stay on time here. It's 1:27. I have 3 more minutes. Now might be a good time if you'd like to use the bathroom or anything like that. But I want to also say thank you to Lindsay Evans. Lindsay Evans is our development director, but all those great speakers like Sheila and Jess and everybody else, Lindsay's the one that organized those speakers. So I'd like for everybody, even though she's not here, just go ahead and give her a round of applause. And then we also have Eric Zach. I'm not going to attempt to say his last name because there's a lot of consonants in there. Eric is the one who sends out the newsletters and handles our TikTok. So the newsletters that you get where he's letting you know what's happening at school boards and how to show up and what to say and all that kind of stuff, that's from Eric. So please give Eric a round of applause too. I actually can't believe that I'm on time. It's kind of amazing. So let me see if there's anything else that I missed here. Oh, there are. Okay. Oh, see, here we go. See? Oh, wait, no, just kidding. There's not. Nope. All right. So I'm trying to think if there's anybody else that I want to thank. What's that? Oh, yeah. If you're not signed up for our Substack, I recently, as many of you probably know, and if y'all want to work on getting the other slide up, that would be great. Or I mean the switching back and forth because I know it's a whole thing and I appreciate you very much. So yeah, I started going to school board meetings. For those of you who don't know, my background is in education. I'm a middle school and high school teacher. I sat on my local school board for 8 years. And I never, from 2012 to 2020, had to deal with anything like what these school board members are dealing with today. People showing up with their pitchforks and torches, demanding, you know, that trans kids are outed or discriminated against actively, you know, not approving curriculum because it's too woke or because it includes topics such as human sexuality and gender identity. So yeah, I started writing a Substack. It was therapeutic to begin with, and now it's actually turned into, I think, a way to really educate people. So thanks, Mary, for bringing that up. But without any further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our next speaker. So John Blake is an award-winning journalist at CNN.com, the online site for CNN. He is also the author of More Than I Imagined, What a Black Man Discovered About the White Mother He Never Knew. He has been honored by the Associated Press, the Society of Professional Journalists, the American Academy of Religion, the National Association of Black Journalists, the Religion Communicators Council, and with the GLAAD Media Award. He was most recently the winner of the 2019 Sigma Delta Chi Awards for Excellence in Journalism for his online columns on race and politics. His 2020 essay, There's One Epidemic we may never find a cure for, Fear of Black Men in Public Spaces. It was recently selected by Bustle Digital Group as one of the 11 best essays on racism and police violence. The other authors on that list included Ta-Nehisi Coates, Ibram X, Kendi, and Roxane Gay. Wow, that's substantial. His first book, Children of the Movement, was a finalist for the 2005 NAACP Image Awards in the Outstanding Literary Work, Nonfiction category, and a finalist for the Gustavus Myers Outstanding Book Awards. He has spoken at high schools, colleges, symposiums, and in documentaries about topics such as race, religion, and politics. He's a native of Baltimore, Maryland, and a graduate of Howard University. Let's welcome John Blake, please.
Thank you. Can everyone see me?
We can see you, yes.
Okay, great. Thanks for the introduction, and thank you, Lindsay, for the invite. Can you hear me as well?
We can hear you.
Okay. So what I thought I would do is talk very briefly about my book, but leave a lot of room for questions and comments. I like dialogue. And I have found that people have a lot of questions about what's happening in our country. And because of my job at CNN and what I do, I have some thoughts on that. And so I just like to hear what you have to say as well and answer some kind of questions. So my story, when you write a book, I've been told that you really learn a lot during the writing of the book. But what I've discovered is that you also learn a lot after the book comes out, when you see how people react to it. And so my book deals a lot with race. It's a memoir. And I remember not long after my book came out in May, I had an interesting discussion that I wanted to share with you. I was talking to a group of readers, and they were in Oregon. And there was a retired psychologist there who told me when we started talking about race and the state of race relations in this country, he said that we will never get past the racial divisions in this country. And he said the reason why is because racism is embedded in everybody's DNA. If you're a human being, racism is embedded in your DNA. And I didn't think too much about what he said at the time, but it just stayed with me. And I bring that up not to criticize him, but to say that I could share a lot of that pessimism. And part of that pessimism for me comes from my whole life story and also being a journalist. So I was born in the mid-60s when interracial marriage was illegal in much of this country. And so my mother disappeared from my life not long after I was born. No one told me why. There was no explanation. And the only thing they told me was that your mother's name is Shirley. She's white, and her family hates Black people. Now, in the community in Baltimore that I grew up in, that kind of hatred was like, it was enthusiastically returned. We understood that because nobody liked white people in my community. The community that I grew up in Baltimore is pretty well known. I don't know if any of you ever heard of this HBO series called The Wire. If you have, that's the neighborhood I grew up in. It was also the setting for one of the most famous race riots / rebellion / uprising, whatever term you want to use, that the country's ever experienced. In 2015, a young Black man named Freddie Gray died in police custody. And he died in the neighborhood that I grew up in. So Freddie Gray was arrested about 5 minutes from where I grew up. And my whole community went up in flames. So it was this all Black, poor inner city neighborhood where no one liked white people. So I grew up in this world knowing that I had a white mother, knowing that I had a white family that wanted nothing to do with me because my father was Black. So I absorbed a lot of the race, a lot of the hatred, the hostility toward white people in my neighborhood. I absorbed it as well. And I'm sure that no doubt a big reason I had hostility is because I knew there was this white side of my family that wanted nothing to do with me. So it was a very strange upbringing. I grew up as what I call a closeted biracial person. In the era that I grew up in, being biracial was a source of shame. There was no Obama, there was no Kamala Harris in public pop culture. There was no Jordan Peele. So I wouldn't tell anyone that my mom was white and I had this whole white family that wanted nothing to do with me. So when I would go to school and we would fill out school forms, they would say, what is the race of your mom? I would put Black. So it was this big secret. And so my story begins to kind of really take off when at 17, my father comes to me one day and he just says, do you want to meet your mother? And from that on, I began to meet her and I began to meet other people in her family, and things begin to change in my life. And I thought I would share just really quickly one story from the book. and then close out and just open it up to comments or discussion. So as I began to meet other members of my mom's family, I had tremendous anger at them, rightly so, because I knew about their racism. I knew they wanted nothing to do with Black people. They were a very working class Irish family in Baltimore. And one of those meetings in particular really transformed me. My mother's sister, her name is Mary. When I was in my mid-20s, she asked to meet me. And at the time, I just started off as a journalist. And I said, no, I really don't want to meet you. But I consented to do so. And I remember when I said, yeah, I'll meet you, I did it more out of curiosity because I heard plenty of stories about her. I heard that she didn't want anything to do with Black people, that she called me and my younger brother, Patrick, she called us zebra children. And her hostility to Black people was something that my father talked all about all the time. So when I met her, we met in West Baltimore, where I grew up. It was a very strange meeting. I thought when I met her that she wanted to apologize for her racism and her family's racism and to say, oh, I should have been there for you as a kid. I should have never shut you out of my life. I'm sorry. Can you accept my apology for my racism and my family's racism? But it was nothing like that. There was no apology. She just wanted to talk. It was curiosity. And I kept meeting her and talking to her. And for a long time, I kept on waiting for this apology that never came. So one day I was talking to her on the phone and I asked her, why didn't you reach out to me or my brother when we were younger? Was it because our father's Black? And she paused. And then she said, no, your race had nothing to do with it. It was because you're not Irish Catholic. I was raised not to associate with Catholics. That was the reason my family wanted nothing to do with you. And I knew immediately that that was a lie. I knew, for example, the stories about my father trying to date my mom. And then when he would go try to date my mom, her father would literally physically attack my father, call him the N-word, and once had him arrested by the police just for trying to see my mom. So I knew that was a lie. So her denial about her racism made me angrier. And so what I did after that conversation, I was in my late 20s at the time, I kind of wrote her off. I didn't really call her or seek her out. And I just kept my distance from her. But a curious thing happened. She continued to want to talk to me. She started writing me letters. And I continued to just say, well, let me just talk to her. And part of the reason I continued to talk to her is because I was curious. I wanted to know more about my mom's family. There was this whole side of myself I knew nothing about. And so I would ask her stories about my mom, about her. And it was a way of just trying to fill in this void to my identity. But then there was something that happened to me one day that changed my attitude toward her. And this is something that happened to me probably about 15 years or so after I met her. The best way I could describe it, I know this is going to sound odd, is that I had my own little kind of mini racial reckoning. I went to a Lowe's home improvement store in Atlanta one weekend morning. I wanted to get paint for my deck. And I went into the store very early Saturday morning, and there were two Lowe's employees behind the counter. One was Black, one was white. The white person was on the phone. He was busy. The Black employee was free, hands folded, nothing to do. I waited for about 5 or 10 minutes until the white employee was off the phone. And then when he was off the phone, I went up to him and I said, what is the correct paint for my deck? Can you mix it for me? And he went back and he got the paint for me and he mixed it. And he said, take this home. This is the right paint for your deck. So I went home, poured out my paint tray, and I opened the can and I poured the paint into the paint tray. And I realized that he had given me the wrong color paint. In fact, what he had given me was this like kind of rainbow colored concoction that I couldn't do anything with. And I was angry. And then it hit me. I didn't get the right color because I couldn't see past color. I had racially profiled this Black man. I had assumed that the white man was more competent. So I waited till he was off the phone to speak to him, but I ignored the Black man. And it hit me. I was like, here I am. At this point, I was middle-aged man. I had been a journalist for like 20-something years. I had written so much about race. People like Robin DiAngelo, Ibram Kendi, people I know, people are my friends. I could talk about racial bias all day, systemic racism. But in those milliseconds when I was in Lowe's, I absorbed this racism that was out in this culture myself. Now, I know there's a big debate about whether, people of color can be racist or not. Keep in mind this. The people that beat Tyree Nichols, that young Black man to death in Memphis last year, they were all Black cops. So people of color can absorb these stereotypes. But the point of the story is this. When I realized that I had done that, I said to myself, maybe I should show my mother's sister a little grace. So what I did is I went up to my office, and there were all these letters that she had written me over the years. And I had never opened up, probably 80% of them I didn't open up because I wanted an apology. And when the apology didn't come for her racism, I wasn't interested in her wanting to feel good. I just ignored her. But I started opening these letters and reading them that she had sent to me over the years. And it took me probably about an hour or two. There were so many. And I remember when I finished reading them, I thought to myself, I am such a fool because everything that I wanted from her was in those letters. She wrote that she was sorry that she didn't reach out to us because she said it was racism. She said she grew up in this all-white segregated world in Baltimore where she never saw Black people. She said that when they went to school, nobody talked about Black history. Nobody talked about civil rights. She said, I thought that the only people who were racist were slave owners. And she said to me, I hope you can forgive me, but I want to have this relationship with you. And then she said even more, she said, if you're so angry at me and you want nothing to do with me, I can totally understand that. And I was just struck by her vulnerability, her willingness to do that. And so not long after me opening those letters, I called her. And then our relationship took off. And it took off to the extent, probably till about a couple years later, she said two words to me that I never thought I'd hear. We were talking about my mom or some kind of business, and I was supposed to do something, and I forgot to do it. And I told her, I said, hey, Aunt Mary, I'm sorry. I was supposed to do this for Mom, but I apologize. And then she said, don't worry about that. We're family. The two words were, we're family. And then it hit me like, God, how did that happen? How did this whole white side of my family, people who were unrepentant racist, how did they change? How did Aunt Mary change? What went on? And so my story talks a lot about why I think they changed. And you hear from Aunt Mary, you hear from other people, my mom's family in that book, and you see how they change. And that's a pattern that you see throughout my story. People you never thought would change, changed in ways that I never would have imagined. And so what does this all mean? People get different messages from the story, but I can say briefly what it means to me. Since I've been a journalist for so long, I have never seen people become so pessimistic about our future as I've seen it now. And I'm old enough to have met Obama when he was a community organizer in Chicago. I'm old enough to have actually gone to LA in 1992 and hear Rodney King say in person, can we all get along? So I've seen all these big racial stories come and go. I've had a front row seat. at all these racial reckonings this country has experienced, but something different. It's something a lot more serious is happening now. And I think a lot of people have given up on the idea that people can change. And so I'm telling this story that challenges that. And it challenges what I learned as a reporter. You see, I used to think as a journalist that if you just give people the facts, they will change. If you just show them this George Floyd video, white Americans will wake up and say, we have a serious problem. If you tell them read Ibram Kendi's book about how to be an anti-racist, if you talk to them about white fragility, if you give them the statistics, you talk about redlining, all that, those are the things that will change people. Yet, my experience from my personal life says that's not what really changes people. When I look back at what changed my aunt, what changed me, what changed all these people I meet in my story, in my life, it always came back down to two things: relationships and community. It was always a situation that would really change people is that they had a relationship, somebody they thought was so different, somebody they thought they could never connect with, but that relationship changed them. And they often had those relationships in a community that demanded that type of relationship. So what I say now is that facts don't change people, relationships do. And it sounds so simple, and it's not, and I'm not saying and implying that we don't fight for voting rights, that we don't fight for social justice. I'm not one of those Black people who say, if we just be friends with white people, racism will disappear. I'm not saying that. I think that's a dangerous message. What I am saying is that that is also a component of fighting for racial justice that I think we have forgotten in the past couple of years. I think we have tried to make it too intellectual sometimes. We think that if you just go to a protest, if you put that Black Lives Matter sign on your lawn, if you read that book, that's doing the work. It's not enough. And I know we have to also pass laws and policy, but I think being in those communities, being in those situations where you have to deal with people who are different, where you change them and they change you, is really important. Now, in my book, the way I found that community was through a church, an interracial church where I had a pastor who grew up in a Jim Crow South, who was a stone cold racist, but he was changed by the people he met. I talk about the church, not in my book, not in an attempt to convert people, proselytize. I know you're a secular organization, but the important thing to me is whether it's a church, whether it's a 12-step program, it could be a bowling league, it could be the military, whatever. I think one of the most crucial things we have to do, we're gonna get past these racial divisions in this country, is create situations where people of different races, different classes, different outlooks have to come together in a community, in some kind of situation where they get to know each other and get a chance to be transformed. And the final thing I'll say is this. I was doing an interview with NPR, and this guy used two words to me that are like poison now. He said, your story is a beautiful story about racial reconciliation. And I told him, like, please don't use that word, because I think my experience has been that people have become so jaded and so filled with despair that they don't really care about these stories about white and Black or brown people learning to see each other as human beings. I think now a lot of people see these stories as kind of inconsequential or naive. You know, like, don't give me these stories of hope. What matters is changing laws and changing policy. I totally agree that changing laws and policy is critically important. All you got to do is Google my stories at CNN and you'll see what I'm coming from. However, I think it's really important as well that we tell these stories of hope. Stories matter. And I'll just be real blunt about it. I think the hard right are better storytellers than people on the left now. Make America Great Again, MAGA, that's a story. That's a story someone is telling about what's happening in this country. I don't agree with the story. I think it's a lie, but it's a story that appeals to people's emotions. And it says, this country is changing in ways. I know you don't like it. You're afraid of the future, what's happening. And here's the reason. I don't think the left is as good at the hard right as telling stories. And I think part of the reason is we don't think hope is an important thing to keep, to be a part of a story. I think we do need those stories of hope. There's a writer that I really like, and I hope I don't mispronounce her name. Her name is Rebecca Solnit, Solnit. And if I'm mangling her last name, please forgive me, because I suspect there are people here I'm talking to who know her. But she said something I thought was so profound. She said, action without hope is impossible. We need hope. And as a Black person, I know from my tradition, that's incredibly important. Someone mentioned Ta-Nehisi Coates earlier when they were introducing me. And one of Ta-Nehisi's most famous essays was in 2015. He wrote this essay for The Atlantic when he said that hope wasn't important, that hope wasn't historical. He went on the Colbert show, and Colbert asked him about that. He said, what about hope? And Ta-Nehisi said, I'm not here to give you hope. I'm not your priest. I don't agree with that. I think Ta-Nehisi is brilliant. But I think as a Black person, hope has always been important to my people. You don't survive the Middle Passage without having hope. You don't survive slavery with your body and your humanity intact without having hope. You don't survive Jim Crow without hope. You don't survive what's going on in this country today without hope. So I'm glad if people read my story that they have hope. I think that's critically important. And it's not the type of naive hope where it's one of those what I call racial kumbaya stories, where the Black person is changing, but white people don't change. And it's like a blind side kind of naive story about race. I'm talking about a muscular hope that looks at squarely at the problems we have with racism, but says people can change in ways you don't expect. And if people can change, so can the country. So that's part of my story. And if you have any comments, suggestions, I'll be glad to entertain them.
Well, first of all, let's go ahead and give him a big round of applause, please. Yeah. And unfortunately, because we do have such a tight schedule, I don't think we're going to have any time for questions. But I do want to say that I really appreciate you pointing out the importance of hope, because it is very easy for us to get stuck in, gestures wildly around us, right? Because everything, it's all being delivered to us constantly, whether it's the climate, education, abortion access, race relations, yada, yada. So having hope is really important. So I'll end this with the same way that I end our weekly discussions. So what gives you hope throughout your days? That's for you, John.
Oh, what gives me hope? Oh, okay. I thought it was to the audience. My mom. My mom is, it's hard to encapsulate, but when I got to know her and members of her family and just seeing the way they changed, that gives me tremendous hope. But I think there's hope too when I look at what's happening in the country. I know it's a really scary year right now because I think a lot of us are dreading this election coming up. But I see a lot of things that are happening in this country that still give me hope. But the main thing is, I would say my mom, she was a person when I met her who seemed to have no reason for hope. And she showed me what hope really looks like for people who don't seem like they have any reason to be hopeful.
Right on. Well, thanks again, John, for joining us today. I appreciate you. Let's give him another round of applause, everybody. Thank you. And then if we could get back to the slideshow, that would be great. Thank you. Let's see. If you wouldn't mind, I want to acknowledge some other board members from Secular AZ who are here. Martha O'Connor is here today. If you want to stand, if you feel like it, or wave your hand around. I already mentioned Mary Ganapole, and she's got materials out there for Arizona end of life options. So please, thank you to you. And actually, that is the other secular group that we are going to learn more about today. So let me click this. Hopefully it works. Make it big. I can do this. Uh-oh, are we not going to be able to get sound? Might not be sound. Thank you so much, tech team. You're awesome. And you come at the state legislature every year, right?
Arizona.
Yeah.
Look, it's in 9 states plus the District of Columbia. There are 70 million people that have access to this law.
Compassion, choice, dignity. Please support the Arizona Medical Aid and Dying Bill.
I want the choice. Pass this law in Arizona now.
This is my life. Let it be my death. Pass the law.
Even though the majority of Arizonans want a medical aid and dying bill, legislators have repeatedly refused to even consider it.
I want the choice to use medical aid in dying if I qualify and if I so choose.
Personally, I strongly believe that medical aid in dying should be an end-of-life care option that is available for all patients with a terminal illness.
Most people want this law, so the legislature should pass it.
I respect your belief, and you don't have to use the law.
There are people who oppose this, and they have every right to do so, but they do not have a right to impose their views on me.
I want the choice. Pass the law in Arizona.
We need to put medical aid in dying on the ballot so that Arizonans can choose.
Arizonans should have a choice on how they want to die. Pass this law.
I've witnessed the painful process of a loved one dying of cancer.
70 million Americans have this law. I want the choice.
When we in Arizona have a terminal illness, we should have choices about how we die.
I want to see this law passed in Arizona.
I'm 100% disabled from my service in Vietnam, and yet the state of Arizona denies me the right to die as I choose to.
I want the choice to use medical aid in dying if I qualify, and it's my choice.
I support medical aid in dying for terminally ill patients because it's the compassionate thing to do.
Having choice at end of life is a healthy end of life.
All right, so just another one of the, oops, I should shut that window, huh? Or tab. Just another example of some of the really great groups that we have here in the state of Arizona that need your support. All right, so let me go ahead and get to our next speaker. You can go ahead and go back onto the Zoom, and I will introduce Jessica. Jessica Pishko is an independent journalist and lawyer who has been writing about the criminal legal system for a decade with a focus on the political power of law enforcement officials. Since 2018, she has been focused on American sheriffs and their role, past and present, in perpetuating mass incarceration and white supremacy, as well as how sheriffs present a growing threat to democracy in this country. Her book, The Highest Law in the Land, about the roots and rise of sheriffs in America, is under contract with Dutton. So she'll be here any moment. But if you, well, we'll wait for it.
I'm here-ish. I don't know if my face is there.
All right, we've got you on our Zoom now. Thanks to the tech team again. Let's go ahead and welcome Jessica, everybody. Thank you. Go ahead and take it away, Jessica.
Okay, great. Thank you guys so much. So I actually have a, that is my book, but I'll put the, it's going to, so to let you guys know, the book is going to come out in September. I'm now in edit. I actually have a PowerPoint that I am going to see if I could share with you. Okay. If I could do it.
Excellent.
And how do I make it big? I don't.
I think if you click the slideshow button in the top kind of right, is that how you do it?
Does
Yeah.
that- Oh,
Okay.
there we go. Oh,
Awesome.
okay.
Thanks
Now
again
it's
to
very
the
big.
team.
No, it's okay. So I did a little PowerPoint for you guys just because I just to hit a few points and also because I have pictures. So I know the time is kind of short today, so I also was going to try to run through quite a lot in a short period of time. And so what I wanted to take you guys through was just a little bit of history and a little bit of background on some of the religious roots of what we call the constitutional sheriff movement. Sometimes I call it the far right sheriff movement. And this is just because sometimes there are some people who get very confused when you use the word constitutional sheriff. They get a little confused about exactly what you're talking about. So, one of the things that I think is kind of important to think about when we think about these sheriffs, first of all, I should clarify what constitutional and far right sheriffs are. And by them, I mean this is sort of a subset, it's a vague set of ideas that a subset of sheriffs hold that they have a power to sort of enforce the law as they choose, generally in a particular way. And the particular way they choose to enforce that law is in a way that's consistent with kind of biblical principles and Christian nationalist ideas. Sorry, I kind of assumed a lot of people knew what it was, but I wanted to be clear with what we mean. Arizona happens to have a large number of sheriffs who identify as constitutional sheriffs in some way or another. So it's important, I think, it's particularly important in Arizona and in terms of thinking about how this impacts people's lives as well as how the law gets enforced. So I have here 3 ways that I think that there are important ways to think about this interaction between sheriffs and Christian nationalism. So one is a belief in biblical literalism. So this is the idea that the Bible is translated literally, right? 2 is this concept of the higher law and when it relates to the U.S. Constitution. So as you guys, again, are probably generally familiar with this concept because it's been highly popularized by the Republican Party. So the Republican Party is now supports a lot of these ideas. But the general idea is that the U.S. Constitution comes from God, right? It has biblical authority. It is holy in nature and embodies ideas that are connected to Christianity. And then the third way that I think is important to keep in mind is what some scholars call millennialism. Millennialism is a fear of the end time. End times could be good or end times could be bad. And that kind of goes along with this fear of corruption by what some call the Antichrist, what they'll often call, corruption by communists, corruption by liberals, mainstream media, right? This idea that the kind of that Christians are under attack by folks who represent non-Christian ideas, and that this conflict will in some way accelerate the end time, which I appreciate is kind of a scary concept. But, I think when you think about an event like January 6th, which, the anniversary today, so it's been on my mind, that had a lot of millennialism thinking, right? Like the end times were coming, and so therefore we needed to accelerate the violence. So I'm gonna gloss through a few people whose ideas have been really important to this. Sorry, I'm trying to keep track of time, so we have time for questions if people want it. One of the main, and this is a historical character, right? He passed away in, I think, the 1990s. A man named William Potter Gale. He started what's commonly called the Posse Comitatus movement. William Potter Gale was a member of Christian Identity. So there's a lot of debate about how to think about Christian identity in terms of Christianity. I'm not really here. I don't want to argue whether it is or isn't Christianity, but what's important about Christian identity is that it did see itself as a religious movement. He saw himself as he was a quote reverend, you can see by his outfit, and that Christian identity was definitively racist movement, anti-Semitic, kind of had this idea that white Anglo-Saxons were the lost tribes of Israel. This became, I think, relatively well known when, you know, when we talk about neo-Nazis and white supremacists, the white separatists, like this was sort of their religious backing. So that has a really important, that contributed to the constitutional sheriff movement and is a part of how that movement came about. And this is sort of some of the ideas of the Posse Comitatus, right? The idea of natural rights, which is a pillar of the Oath Keepers and Christian nationalism, an emphasis on sheriffs as the only legitimate law enforcement. This idea of citizen juries, which I have seen coming back a little bit in some Western states. They've revived this idea of like, you can have citizen juries that enact, you know, that people can form alternative government, right? And then this this part about Lamont Beach, another Posse Comitatus leader who was in the Pacific Northwest. One of the aspects of Posse Comitatus was just their willingness to use violence is kind of an important factor. Okay, then the next person I kind of wanted to just float by people is a Mormon scholar named Cleon Skousen. If you've heard of Cleon Skousen lately, it's because Glenn Beck, you guys remember back to the Tea Party and Glenn Beck, he was revived by Glenn Beck and was important to many Tea Party politics. He is LDS. He formed an institute called the Freeman Institute, which is now the National Center for Constitutional Studies. They produced those mini constitutions with George Washington on the cover. So if you see a little constitution with George Washington, he's holding a quill on the cover. That's like the Skousen Constitution. He is very important for the constitutional sheriff movement, particularly in Arizona and the West. Richard Mack was studied with Cleon Skousen. Almost all of the constitutional sheriffs in Arizona are very familiar with Skousen's work. He is an extremely important figure, especially among people who are LDS. So Stuart Rhodes read and understood Skousen, and as I said, almost many of the sheriffs in Arizona do. His ideas have been sort of picked up by Pat Robertson, the Moral Majority, which are evangelicals, and I know there's been somewhat, they kind of are different stage because there has historically been conflict between the LDS Church and Christian evangelicals, but of late I see sort of more bringing of this together. Okay, so here I have a video. This is our friend Mark Lamb, who is the current sheriff of Pinal County. And let's see if this works.
Oh, unfortunately, the sound isn't.
Is it not
Somebody
working?
here says they don't need to hear him.
I apologize if it's triggering. It's not going to work.
There's no audio for that video for some reason, so it might be because you have. I don't really know, but could you maybe summarize a little bit of what he says?
Yeah, I'm happy to summarize it. So, I could actually also send you guys this video clip. I saved it on my laptop. So this is from a September 2020 CSPOA conference that was at Liberty University. You'll note the date, which was like right at the beginning of the COVID pandemic. So they held it at Liberty University because nowhere else would allow in-person gatherings. So it's kind of an interesting segment. So of late, Sheriff Mark Lamb has distanced himself from the CSPOA and Richard Mack to some degree. In this particular segment, he is actually quoting Cleon Skousen. So he's quoting Cleon Skousen. So there's a sort of idea about the Constitution will hang by a thread. You guys may or may not have heard this before. So there's this sort of LDS prophecy. A lot of the Bundy family quote this too, that the Constitution is hanging by a thread and that the sheriffs are there to preserve the Union and the Constitution. He also says in this that he also said in this meeting that he's related to Richard Mack, which I have not been able to verify. And he also asserts other ideas that Cleon Skousen said, so including things like this is a Christian country, the Constitution is Christian, we need to abide by Christian ideas. Now, I will say that Mark Lib has backed away from some of this in his current Senate campaign. But just to put out there that this is what he said in 2020. We're gonna skip him. Oh, by the way, it's a little bit funny because there's huge pictures of, they did it in this room with like gigantic pictures of Jesus in the background. All right, just to add, and he says in his speech like he's inspired by this giant, there's sort of like this giant diptych of like, this is right, Jesus on the cross, and then like Jesus resurrecting. It's all very impressive in its imagery. Our friend Richard Mack, you guys are probably familiar with him. Let's see. If Jessica would share her audio in Zoom, we could hear it. Oh, how do I do that? Did I do that? Sorry, I apologize. I'm hearing this. I don't know if I know how to share my audio in Zoom.
I mean, it's okay. There's not much we could do if the audio's not working.
Yeah, now I'm like flipping around and want to go back. Hold on. Wait, my slideshow got away from me. I'll just do this because it was all getting away from me and creating problems. Like I said, I'm happy if we have time. I could pull it up on my computer and show you, or I could send it to you guys. Just to kind of sorry, I also want to make sure I'm conscious of time. Here we have Richard Mack. Many of you guys might be familiar with him. Well, he was a sheriff of Graham County, which is very rural. He, of course, founded the CSPOA, has run for other offices a few times, hasn't been able to, hasn't made it stick. Now this is his sort of full-time job is like corralling the constitutional sheriff. Famous quotes from him, etc. And then sort of add and emphasize that the CSPOA's mandate, right? A lot of their mandates are Christian nationalist in nature, right? So this is coming from the CSPOA's point of view. This is coming quite a lot from Skousen, but they also are incorporating a lot of ideas from other Christian nationalist traditions, right? Evangelical traditions. So like this idea of this, he sort of gives the sheriff this like unique capability, history, this idea of like a supreme law, right? Like sort of a reference to biblical law, and to sort of support that, right? Like I've talked, sometimes I think people make this false equivalency. So they'll say like, oh, well, sheriffs on the right, well, they don't support gun laws, but sheriffs on the left won't do deportation, right? They sort of make this equivalency like, well, it happens on both the right and the left. And I don't agree with that. So like, I want to be clear that like the kind of interposition and nullification, skip to my interposition nullification, the kind of interposition nullification that happens on the right, it is not the equivalent of sheriffs saying that they are not going to cooperate with ICE or exiting agreements with federal immigration. Like the philosophy that Richard Mack is using, the idea of personal liberty, it is a biblical interpretation of personal liberty. It is not what we would call personal liberty. So for example, Mack opposes abortion. He opposes, so I've asked him like, so if it's personal liberty, like what about liberty of abortion? No, that doesn't count. What about liberty of women who are in abusive relationships? That doesn't count either, right? He doesn't think women should be able to exit abusive relationships. What about gay marriage? That definitely doesn't count, right? All these things don't count. Like, so to be totally clear, like the liberty he's talking about, it is a Christian vision of liberty that is for sort of people to live Christian values. It is not some sort of like, like I think some people kind of want to swing it as like a libertarian, your choice. It is not like a libertarian, your choice. It is like what the Bible says. What the Bible says your choice. And so I wanted to raise those two ideas. So he frequently brings up these ideas, interposition and nullification. Interposition is literally like standing between. So the sheriff will block federal or state authority. This was their argument a lot during COVID. Nullification is the idea that you're just going to ignore the law totally. And this is, like I said, to be clear, since these terms have been used, this was used prior to the Civil War. It was revived during in the 60s when the Civil Rights Act was passed. It has always been used to argue for the idea that local governments can interpose when the federal and state government is attempting to do something like support the civil rights of minorities. This is purely what they mean. They don't mean anything like you could protect immigrants in your county. That's not what they're talking about. They're talking about things like, well, if we don't want gay marriage in our county, we don't have to do it. So that I forgot her name, but the woman who wouldn't certify, there was a clerk who wouldn't like certify someone's marriage, right? That was a version of interposition that Mac phrased that Kim Davis, right? So Kim Davis wouldn't sign the piece of paper. That's interposition. She's like, no, we're not doing that in my county, and I get to decide what we're doing. Protect America Now is Mark Lamb's group. So if you're familiar with Mark Lamb, that's him. It kind of bridges the Republican mainstream with constitutional sheriff. He kind of keeps it a little more. It kind of keeps it a little more mainstream. It's still God, family, and freedom is their messaging. So it's obviously not, that sort of viewpoint neutral. They're very focused on like anti-woke. Since he started his Senate campaign, he's very focused on being anti-immigrant. And so that's kind of where he's been going with that. Oh, so other people in the constitutional sheriff universe, the Black Robe Regiment is more popular in the South. This is a group of pastors who believe that they are like there to like battle the evil, like secular evil. Michael Perutka is a lawyer. He was the GOP nominee for Attorney General in Maryland. So he was, endorsed by regular GOP Republicans. He is, I'm trying to think of the right word for him. He is absolutely a segregationist. He does not, he has said that he does not believe in mixed race marriages. So that's where he's coming from. He has a group called the Institute on the Constitution and teaches a Christian nationalist interpretation of the Constitution. Christian Hall is another quote constitutional lawyer. She's out of Florida. Her husband is a pastor. His name escapes me at the moment, but he is a pastor. They travel around together. Their latest project is they did a movie documentary, if you could call it that. It's called Non-Compliant to the Sheriff. It's about sheriffs who help keep churches open during COVID. So a lot of these people have gotten a lot of traction by arguing that the closure of churches, like no one could have any in-person gathering. So including churches in that with some sort of restraint on religion, right? So that's sort of given, I think, this whole combination, the constitutional sheriff, Christian nationalist universe, a new traction. And then I'll just do two more. So this is in Michigan, but if you notice, a lot of sheriffs have started to put this back on their cars, this like in God we trust thing. Oh, here's Richard Mack. So he was at America Fest in Phoenix. He's pictured here with Frank Pavode and Rabbi Pete. I don't know much about this rabbi here. I do know Father Frank Pavode was kicked out of he was defrocked because he was, I think he did some very unusual, he did some very strange anti-abortion protests, and so was kicked out of the Catholic Church, whatever you have to do for that. So there he is hanging out with them. He's expanding his, horizons. Here's me. I'm on Twitter and Blue Sky. You can find me. I have a Substack where I write about sheriff. My book will come out in the fall, so I'm very much looking forward to hopefully talking to you guys about that. And do people have questions they want to ask?
Yeah. So let's see. Does anybody here have any questions for Jessica about the constitutional sheriff movement? Brian, do you have a question? Oh, Oh, okay, over there. Yeah, let's wait. Make sure you have the microphone so folks online can hear you too.
Hello, thank you for all of your work. First off, this is very important, and we experience it every day in Arizona, especially us that live in constitutional sheriff areas. My question to you isn't that, anyway, have you watched the recent season of Fargo? And
Oh, yes, I'm watching it right now, actually.
and are you entertained or appalled by their depiction of constitutional sheriffs?
Entertained because he's a bad guy. So I haven't been like that upset about it. But I haven't finished the season. But like, yeah, my question is like, how many constitutional sheriffs have nipple piercing? Unknown. Like, did not come up in my reporting. So I have more I need to discover apparently.
Any other
That's in
questions?
episode 2, so I'm not spoiling too much.
We've got one more question over here.
Hi, Jess. My name is Jennifer Hilsbos, and I'm actually the first vice chair of the Democratic Party in Pinal County. So it was more of an observation for you.
Yay!
We
Yay for you.
see the constitutional sheriff in action all the time. We have repeatedly requested that the sheriff's department be audited for how much money they're spending in things like I-10, US Interstate I-10 interdictions that are not directly helping the citizens of Pinal County. And that's one of the ways in which this movement really hurts rural counties, is that they are misappropriating funds to do the job of the federal government because they don't like the way that the federal government is operating.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I have two. People ask me a lot, like, what's the on the ground impact, right? I mean, I think there's a few different ones. Like, I think one is sort of emboldened, especially in rural areas, since this is a rural conference. Pinal is sort of funny because it's like rural but big. One is that they sort of inspire. I mean, they inspire militias, right? They inspire people who are far right, who are malicious, who are just like people who want to go out and shoot guns. And you can see Mark Lamb do that, right? He has his fans who come to the. I watched the county commissioner meetings on video because I pay a prize. So that's one way. The second way I agree is the use of money. So Mark Lamb has taken an incredible amount of money from the federal government. Under Biden, his money under Operation Stone Garden has doubled. He gets something like $6 billion a year from the federal government. And sometimes when people ask me, like, what's something we could do? Like, my first thing is, like, stop giving them money. Like, why are we giving Mark Lamb money? He does it like he has his helicopter and it's a really fun toy and whatever, but like it's not right. He's not on the US-Mexico border. He is, as you point out, he's like using right. He's doing this, and then he also does these videos, which I have like strong opinions about all these videos that I mean I abhor them. I think they're wrong. We have no way to verify who these people are, what they were actually doing. Like as a lawyer, I think they're like legally problematic, but there's also the issue of Mark Lamb and his mixing of funds in terms of his political and office funds. So I was just thinking for you. Sorry, I was just thinking for you. So he did that video on he won some award because he did a video about like pulling over, whatever, past left lane something, and he used that to campaign. He uses his helicopter to campaign for Senate. This is all like illegal. I mean, he's not supposed to be doing that. And then there's been, I think there's probably misappropriation of money. And then I think the third thing that some of these sheriffs are doing that is hard to figure out is I think they are not investigating certain kinds of incidents. I think they are ignoring. I think they are probably ignoring domestic violence. I think they're ignoring one of the things that came out when I talked to another sheriff, not in Arizona, was that basically he was ignoring crimes that involve sexual crimes men were committing against women. That he was not arresting men for assault. He was not arresting men for stalking. He was not arresting men for violence, but he was arresting women for fake, for what he called like false rape. So then I asked, like, well, what about this woman who, made it? No, she committed a crime, absolutely a crime. So like, I also think that there's like, or missing people, like what missing people get investigated, what missing people don't get investigated. I think that there's like probably a lot going on there that I suspect it's hard to find out, but I suspect that that's like the other thing that's happening.
I wish we had time for more questions. This was a
Yeah,
great
sorry.
discussion, Jessica, but we are on a super tight schedule. So everybody,
Yeah.
please, let's give Jessica a round of applause today, please. Thank you. Thanks. Thanks so much for
Yeah.
taking time out of your busy schedule. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Whenever you can, get back to the slides. The next secular group that we have here in Arizona that I want to share with you is Reason Riders. We've got a few representatives from the group here today. And Kevin, also known as Hondo Hickman, is also on our board of directors. So Kevin, did you want me to click on this, or do you want to say a few things, or did you just want to like let people know that you're here? Okay, well, everybody, Reason Riders, they are here. They are here. And you all do a lot of service work, correct? That's the bulk of the stuff that you do. Yeah, I learned a lot more about Reason Riders at the American Atheist Conference this last April, and they're a great group and they're a lot of fun, and we certainly had fun after all the sessions as well. So thank you for joining us today. And with that, we're going to be going, I think, to the camera now because it's going to be now in person. So why don't I go ahead and if Jennifer and Elisabeth, if you want to go ahead and now, would this work best if they were sitting over here, y'all, or how would we do this so that people can see it? Will that work? Will people be able to see us? Well, I guess I could, you know what, I could just sit here if they want to sit there, and then I can have this mic and we can talk, because this one's going to be more of a freestyle. So, okay, cool. I can do that. Okay, so real quick, I'm going to go ahead and introduce today. You tell me what you want me to do or if I need to get out of your way, but I've got it here. Okay. So as you all know, our theme this year, we decided to talk about rural issues because outside of Maricopa County, there's this little place called Arizona. And so, and spoiler alert, the representation there at the state level isn't great. And when I met with these two individuals to talk a little bit about the things that they face in their rural counties, I had to like pick my jaw up off the floor because I couldn't quite believe it. Like, we think it's bad here in our urban areas. Whew, just wait. Okay, so first, I'm going to introduce Jennifer. Jennifer Hilsbos has dedicated her career and community involvement to tackling some of society's most pressing challenges. Since 2016, she's been a vibrant force in local politics, actively engaging and shaping positive change at the grassroots level. Through her work on local and county campaigns such as Committee to Elect Adrian Fontes and community organizations such as Stronger Together AZ and Santan Valley Democrats, Jennifer amplifies the voices of marginalized communities and pushes for policies that create a more just and equitable society. Go ahead and raise your hand, Jennifer, so everybody knows which one you are. There we go. And then we also have Elisabeth Tyndall. Elisabeth lives in southeast Arizona, very close to the Mexican border, with her family of 3 people and 3 dogs. She came to Arizona after growing up in rural Maryland and living in New England for several years. 2016 reawakened Elisabeth's passion for politics and volunteering to make change happen in her community. She has been involved with the Cochise Democrats since then and has been chair since 2018. Elisabeth is passionate about rural communities, and her day job is working with the Cochise community to increase access to nourishing food and activities. In her spare time, she loves to cook, read fiction, and be outside. So let's go ahead and welcome Elisabeth too. And then, I'm not sure, can we get the camera on us? Will we be able to do that? Okay, cool. We can squish. Yeah, where would you like us? Oh, okay, I can do that. This is long enough, I think. Is this okay? Yeah? Okay, cool. So you know what? Why don't we, because this is going to be more conversational, because like I said, when they start telling you some of the things that are happening in their communities, you're going to want to pull all your hair out and punch yourself in the face or something. So let's see. Jennifer, why don't you just maybe give us a little bit of what you all are dealing with in Pinal County? And we heard some of it just now, so.
Yes. Okay. So hi again. I'm Jennifer Hilsbos, and I'm from Pinal County. And as Jess pointed out during her presentation, Pinal County is this fun little microcosm of rural transitioning to urban. So some of you may have heard of the death of a young student by the name of Preston Lord recently. Has everybody heard about that? That was a Santan Valley student who attended a local high school 7 miles from where I actually live. Let's see, that happened just before Halloween. And just last week, charges were finally submitted to the Maricopa County Attorney's Office to start holding people accountable for the death of this very vibrant young man who was taken out of our community. And I was telling Jeannie on my way here, I don't leave up through Maricopa County. I don't leave my district that way very often. But I was on Ellsworth Road approaching the 24 extension off the 202 in the very far Southeast Valley. And there was a billboard that I was happening upon for the re-election campaign of our Senator Jake Hoffman. Have any of you heard of him? So his billboard has a picture of his face. It says, "Re-elect Jake Hoffman, faith, family, accountability."
Irony.
Right.
Irony.
And so just a couple of things that are going on out, aside from our constitutional sheriff, who said that it didn't matter what laws were passed here in the state capitol, he was going to only enforce laws that he felt were constitutional. And that, to me, basically sums up the constitutional sheriff's movement. But aside from everything that Jess talked about with our sheriff, every single one of our county board of supervisors meetings opens with a prayer. Every single one of our school boards, our high school boards, not all of our elementary school boards, but every single one of our union school districts, or unified school districts, or union high school districts this year has reviewed a policy about prayer at the school board meetings. Apparently, some of them have never read the First Amendment past freedom of speech. And to get back to Jess Piper's point from earlier, we are a rural county that is transitioning into urbanhood, and we are seeing a significant loss of school dollars due to the ESA voucher expansion. And the only place in Pinal County to use those, if you are not homeschooling, is biblical micro schools operated by these fringe evangelical churches that don't even have things like websites. So what is our, and they focus on things like purity culture. The boys and the girls go to school separately. The girls must wear long skirts, long shirts, long sleeve shirts, and have themselves covered up to here in order to attend school. Well, I mean, right? And this is just, when we talk about our elected officials, and just was kind of touched on this point a little bit, one of our county supervisors is an oath keeper. So supervisor in County District 5 in Pinal County is Jeff Sturdy, and he is an oath keeper. He is a member of that organization. And then we have Supervisor Mike Goodman, who never campaigns because he is LDS, and he counts on the vote and support of his church community. And it is very difficult to break into that. He will essentially hold that seat until he decides to retire, because nobody in the church is going to challenge him because he isn't an elder or a bishop, or I'm not sure what they're called. And so he's very high up in the church there, but he's also, everyone says, oh, you can trust him because he's LDS. And as we know, those are the folks that have recently, by Arizona state law, been exempted from reporting sex crimes against children. So, and with that, that's a natural transition into some of the stuff that Elisabeth is going to talk about over here.
Hi, everybody. Because that law comes from my county. I'm in Cochise County. Those of you that don't know, that's on the southeast part of the state. We border Mexico and New Mexico, and then Greenlee, Graham, and Pima primarily. So, yeah. We've been in the news a lot lately, and most of you know about our board of supervisors. And it's interesting because, we've gotten a lot of attention from the media for the actions of our two Republican supervisors and David Stevens, who is the recorder. And so I don't need to rehash all of that, but I will anyway. But it actually goes back even longer than that. And one of the themes that I always try to tell people, especially in our rural communities, if you don't have strong groups like watching and looking and paying attention, our elected officials get away with everything, right? And so it doesn't matter if it's a political group or a secular group or whoever, it's super important. And I think our county supervisors are an exact example of why that's important. So really when we started to get the most attention is when our board of supervisors voted against COVID funds for our very rural county. And we actually have had, and still do, one of the worst COVID rates in the state, because there was very few places to go get medical care. First of all, I was very fortunate because I'm an educator, so I was able in the initial vaccines to get a vaccine early. But if you weren't one of those lucky people, you were kind of screwed. And so our board of supervisors voted against COVID funds, because God will take care of it. And seriously, to this day, that is still a theme at our board of supervisors meetings. Fast forward to what we all know about, and with the election denialism, not wanting to count votes, our board of supervisor, Tom Crosby, is really good friends with election denier Robert Montgomery, and that's all. So is Jake Hoffman. Yeah, they're all really good friends. But I think Jennifer brought up a really interesting story about the Supreme Court's decision to allow LDS bishops to not have to report sexual abuse. And that stems from a case in our county where a Border Patrol agent was abusing his children online. So it wasn't, it was well known. And the two individuals, the two bishops that he reported to, that he actually went to his church and asked for help and said, I'm doing these awful, terrible things. And they called up their hotline and were told that they did not have to report this. And it went through. Finally, he was busted and arrested, and he ended his life while he was incarcerated. So it went through the court system, and the judge actually said, because he had done this online, that he did not have a right to privacy. He did not have his bishops did not have to, there was not a right to privacy. And of course that was overturned by the Arizona Supreme Court. But one of those bishops was appointed with the false elector to elected positions in our county. So these people were rewarded for what is really egregious behavior. And it is these very tight connections. And, when I was listening to Jess Piper earlier, it just and I'm sure everyone here had the same reaction. You see it all of the time, right? Like the connections, and in rural communities, those church connections, it is almost impossible to get leverage beyond those connections, because they do use those spaces to preach and make the things, right? I do just want to say Lupe Diaz, our LD 19 rep, used to preach the big lie from his pulpit when he finally realized, this is nobody watches, when he finally realized that we could see his YouTube. He took it down, but in full, like on YouTube in full open, he had no problem preaching the big lie from his church pulpit, and with his all girls church related school group. So
I told you that that my jaw would be on the floor. And I don't remember, it's on my phone, I think, the other notes that I took when we all met and talked together. But one of you talked about how tax dollar, like they're talking about building a road so that it would go to a religious charter school. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. So just recently, our Sierra Vista City Council approved funds to extend what is Buffalo Soldier Trail. It's one of the major roads in our area, because the ALA,
American Leadership Academy, and it's run off of the LDS church values.
Is building a school, because right now they're still virtual, which there's a lot of irony there, but I'll skip that. And they, so they're extending the road so that the school can build on land that's been owned by the city for quite some time. So it's an interesting relationship.
And you talk about too how, like, one thing too is a lot of these rural communities, their entire school board or other elected positions are members of some kind of fundamentalist, cult, right? Like they are. I'm sorry, but I personally feel like fundamentalism is a cult, and so they are on their boards. When we met with the newly formed, what are you all calling yourself? The White Mountain Secularists or something? It's Ravon Bowens who put them together. We were, thank you, yes, they're very rural, yes. But we talked about how, was it, I think Strawberry and Taylor, like every single member of that board is, they're all LDS, and so nobody even pays attention to whether they are like opening with a prayer. Or it makes me think of like the FLDS church up in Colorado City, and how who even knows what's going on there with the vouchers, and the fact that their child brides are not only qualifying for the vouchers themselves, but then all the children that they're required to have as a mandate of their Heavenly Father or whatever, then they get the vouchers for them too.
Well, and so to speak to that, the LDS connection there, for those of you who aren't aware, Mike Goodman, one of our Pinal County Board County Supervisors, is LDS. He is in the same ward as Sheriff Mark Lamb, as well as two other of the elected officials, our county assessor and our county treasurer. So they're all basically they all go together, and there are questions about whether or not, if they go to church at the same time, do we have some sort of open meeting law violation? Because now they are essentially creating a little microcosm of our county government in their ward, and are they having discussions that we as members of the citizenry should be a party to?
One other story that I remember you told is the Queen Creek council member Padilla. Could you tell us a little bit about some of his great policy ideas?
Okay, so in the bulk of our voters are in the town of Queen Creek, which is a very far right board, although we do have two Democrats on there, but those are two Democrats who are essentially underground. And we have our most recent board member that was elected during the last election in 2022, Travis Padilla. He is an election denialist. He has decided and put forth a proposal to the town council that we eliminate paternity leave or pull it back down to 1 week. And his reasoning behind that is twofold. Number one, very few men apparently take more than a week off in the city to be with their newly born children. And the other reason being is that is the mother's role. And we all know that that is a very biblical, far right fundamentalist idea that women should stay at home with the children and the men should go to work. And he doesn't have any regard for these things called federal laws like FMLA, which says that every person is entitled to 12 weeks, paid or unpaid. It's no wonder that some of the highest property taxes in the state are in Queen Creek, because when you have to litigate these issues, it costs a lot of money.
And then I had another one written down here for you, Elisabeth. I think it was for you. You had a story about your daughter in school and what I don't remember because my notes are terrible. But if you could share that story, that.
Oh, this was so sad. Luckily, my daughter's tough. So many moons ago, when she was in kindergarten or first grade, one of the little boys that she went to daycare with and her had a conversation. And I want to say that where my daughter goes to school, directly across the street is the Methodist Church. And we're very lucky. They allow us to use our parking lot and everything because, of course, our school doesn't have enough room to park. But there's a daycare there, or an after-school care program as well. And initially, I had just gone back to work, and I was like, oh, it'll be a perfect place for my daughter to go because it's right across the street from the school, super easy. Christmas rolls around and she's like, they keep talking about this really weird stuff. What's going on here? And I'm like, oh. And about that same time, we're going into school, and this little boy was like, you don't believe in Jesus. You're gonna go to hell. And my daughter's like, what? And he was like, we have to believe in Jesus. We have to be warriors for Jesus. And I'm like, this is a really weird conversation. Maybe just not need to go play in traffic. No, no, I did not say that. No.
We don't condone.
We don't
condone children playing in the traffic, no matter what they say about us.
It was like, no, maybe we need to not have this conversation. And he was like, no, we really need to be like warriors for God. And this is like a 5 or 6 year old child saying this to my daughter. And my daughter was just like, whatever. But it did really kind of bother her. And actually, I had a conversation with the boy's mom, and she was like, oh, I'm so sorry. But fast forward a couple years, because we were still relatively new in the community, his dad is one of our top sheriff's department people. And his mom is, was a president, but now isn't, of one of the big Republican clubs in our area. And got very upset and offended when I wouldn't let her husband come speak with our party about immigration. Very offended. It's very actually interesting. Our sheriff also got very offended that I wouldn't let him come to speak with us about that as well. Which I was surprised he was not part of the constitutional sheriffs, but I don't think he's definitely not as extreme as Lamb. But oh my gosh, Lamb is his friend. He's always hosting little parties for them, like photo ops on the border there. So
they sound like the worst parties ever. Let's see. So you know what? We've got about 5-ish more minutes. So is there anybody who has any questions? Oh wow, look at hands going right up. Okay. And then
I just wanted to point out that they copied all this from Gilbert people. We've grown through it already, but the schools and all of the prayer at school, all that kind of stuff, especially on the charter schools in ALA, that's where it all started. Peterson and Grantham, I think, are the two that are the main culprits that basically own the companies that build the schools that are profiting off of this, and they sit in our legislature still today.
Yep,
and we need to get rid of these people.
Just like Hoffman and the fact that he sat on Higley's, is this one on? Okay. Okay. And he sat on Higley's school board, and then he moved on to the town council for Queen Creek, and now he sits at our legislature and actively works against the nominees of our duly elected Democratic Governor Katie Hobbs.
In Cochise County, is the border really a war zone?
I will be honest. It is a mess, and it ebbs and flows, and it currently is a big mess, and ultimately, it's a huge burden on our communities. Because we don't have the resources, we don't have the places. When street drop-offs started back in the summer, it was such a scramble for our communities to try to figure out where they would try to house people while they waited for the buses from Tucson to come and get them. And on the flip side of that, actually a really good story. I had to turn down a media interview because we're amplifying requests for donations to help with the churches that are helping these folks. And the reason why is because the volunteers are scared. They're scared of the pushback or anything that would happen. So it was probably in the news. I don't know how many of you saw it. There was 2 churches in Douglas, which is on the border, that were burned down. And the gentleman who did it is yeah, I'm trying to be nice. And he is he's an extremist. And while we cannot speak to his motives, but we can certainly, extrapolate it. So that is a huge problem, and it is resources wise. And of course, our sheriff, like Jess was talking about, spends a good deal of resources doing the job of federal agencies. And some of it is just capacity, but it is, honestly, it could be better. I won't lie. Oh gosh, no, I can see Mexico from my house.
And real quick, I would just like to thank you for recognizing something that my sheriff doesn't. We are not a border county in Pinal.
But it isn't. I'm not. And we hike. I hike in areas where they have signs that say, activity happens here. I've never had an issue. I've seen cars stop and load up people, and I've never been scared. What does scare me is when the sheriff's department chases people high speed through our neighborhoods. And that is a problem, right? Like that, and it's all an issue. But that actually, I have to tell my kid, if you hear sirens, get off the road. Don't even be on the sidewalk. You need to get up against someone's garage. And that's, I don't have to tell her, if you see a group of people walking across the wash, stay away from them, because she's never going to see those people. That's never going to be a threat. And so that is the problem for me.
We have time for one more.
Yeah, real quick question. So my road name is Sprinkles. My real name is Ben, but I go by Charlie Zoom when I've been down there at the board meetings in the past, and I've caused some infighting down there, wanting to asking for satanic prayer. I was gonna start that all up again, but my question to you was, number one, is that going to even be worth my time? Because I am in STV. I know whose ward I'm in. I know how that ward is controlled. And number two, the meetings are at 9:30 on Wednesday. Is that by design?
That is absolutely by design.
So that people like me don't have time to go down there.
And you are probably not very far from where I live, because I live in Santan Valley as well.
Yeah, Ocotillo Ironwood.
Oh, yep. Okay. I live off of Skyline. Hi. But yes, no, it's absolutely by design that the board meetings are at 9:30 in the morning on a Wednesday morning, so that no one is able to skip work and be there. What I will tell you is that we actually have a unique chance, not to get too much into the politics of the situation, but after redistricting, we have 3 flippable supervisor districts, but I only had candidates to field in 1. So I am scrambling at the last minute trying to find people to run. Now, unfortunately, he's not in the right area, but it is absolutely worth it to continue to push for satanic prayer. And if you want to see me after this, we will be happy to get some seculars and atheists down there to support you. Yes, that's because Kavanaugh is a libertarian in Republican clothing. But he's not going to sit on the Board of Supervisors anymore. He is running for sheriff. He is an accountant. He has no law enforcement experience, and he is one of the 2 top runners to replace Sheriff Mark Lamb. What I am very proud of is I was able to recruit a very highly qualified sheriff candidate, and we actually have 2 sheriff's candidates that are Democrats running in Pinal County right now. One of them is a former deputy chief in the Maricopa County Sheriff's Department, and another one of them has been working in personal protection for most of his adult life. So we have 2 very highly qualified candidates, both of whom have held CEO level positions in personal safety and or policing, and they're both very highly qualified Black men. So.
Real quick, and don't you also have somebody running against Jake Hoffman?
I do. I am happy to. We actually are going to have a very big to-do over this, but we actually have a full slate of Democrats running for state House and Senate in LD 15. Our state Senate candidate is a gentleman by the name of Jared DeLuca. And for those of you who are on TikTok or have followed the story of the Queen Creek family who had their pride flag defaced and destroyed earlier this year, that is Mr. Jared DeLuca and his husband Tim, and he is our state Senate candidate in 2024.
And with that, I'd like to say we are a nonpartisan organization, and we do not endorse candidates, and we don't favor one party over the other. We just oppose evangelical extremists, right? And we know which party they usually belong to. So let's give these wonderful women a round of applause, please. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you. All right. Thank you. All right. Let's see. What do we have next here? Do we have another group? Oh, we have the Phoenix Atheist Meetup group, and I know that David is here right there. David, is there anything that you would like to say about your group?
Yeah, okay, so we are a meetup group here based in Phoenix. We have over 3,000 people in the group, although many of them are not all that active, but I'm hoping that in this new year to get more active. And primarily, I would like to say that our focus in the group is kind of more social. So for those of you who just want to kind of like get together with like-minded people, do coffee shops, meals, hiking, those kinds of social activities, I would really like to encourage you all to look up the group, meetup.com, and navigate down into Phoenix Atheists. And I have some material outside on the tables there, so please come and join us, because we need the numbers. I mean, we're always great in numbers, but you will always enjoy yourself. I guarantee you. You'll meet a lot of new people, and it'll be interesting. So thank you.
Thank you so much. All right. Oops, I need my notes. And then I think his slideshow is on this drive right here, correct? So I'll just have to toggle over to that. Okay. Okay. All right, so.
Jeannie, the White Mountain Secularists are going to talk for a minute too.
Oh, let's go ahead and let's have the speaker go first, and then we'll get to you, Ravon, I promise, okay? All right. Today, our final speaker today, presenter, is Joseph Jaafari. Am I saying it right, Jaafari? right? Okay, I should know. I worked for his dad for like decades. Joseph Darius Jaafari is an investigative reporter and editor based out of Phoenix, Arizona. He received his undergraduate degree in film from York College in Queens, New York, as well as a graduate degree in urban reporting and documentary filmmaking from the CUNY Graduate School of Journalism. Originally from Mesa, Arizona, he worked as a features writer for the San Mateo Daily Journal, San Francisco's 7x7 magazine, and worked in legal trade publications covering military health and workers' compensation. He has written accountability features on policing within Toronto, Seattle, and Detroit's queer communities for Rolling Stone magazine, Them, Teen Vogue, and Vice News. His documentary Woof, a barcumentary, received international recognition for its work on exposing abuse within the queer kink scene. He also has been published in The Atlantic, Vice News, and the New York Times on issues such as military safety, HIV discrimination, and sexual assault in rural Africa. Since 2018, Joseph has worked as an investigative reporter for the Marshall Project, PA Post, Spotlight PA, the Arizona Republic, covering prisons, jails, and police. And by the way, if you haven't seen that work, make sure you look it up. And his work on that beat has earned him recognition from the Keystone Awards, Best of the West, and he was a finalist for both the Silver Gavel Award and the, I'm not going to be able to say this right, the Al Newharth Award for Innovation in Investigative Journalism. I think I missed a part of your bio because he also started a publication called Lookout Phoenix, where he focuses specifically on current events as they relate to the LGBTQ community. So please help me welcome Joseph Jaafari. Okay, good, you got it? Okay, cool. Perfect, here, I'm gonna put this, oh, oops, sorry, let me get
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. I'm actually really glad that I came early to, I didn't know what time I was going to start, and so I came early, and I'm really happy I did because you all have had really fantastic speakers. How do I expand this? There we go. All right. So, hi. So my name is Joseph Darius Jaafari. I am the founder and editor-in-chief of Lookout, which is a brand new nonprofit accountability news outlet in Phoenix. We're actually the only investigative queer news outlet across the nation. We're based here in Arizona. It's right here. We started in December of 2022, first as a Substack covering exclusively Phoenix. And then we got a significant grant that actually allowed us to cover the rest of the state. And we are now in the 4 major counties, so Maricopa, Pima, Yavapai, and Coconino. But after today, I feel like we should probably go to Cochise and Pinal. So I'm just going to go ahead and tell us, because we are brand new, a lot of people don't know about us. So I'm just going to tell you guys a bit about what we do at Lookout first before I kind of go into the reporting that we've done in rural Arizona as part of our edict to really cover religious bigotry across the state. So we do have 4 main focus areas across Lookout. Health, politics, education, and safety, those are our main beats. But then earlier on into our reporting, we kind of heard from people that, religious bigotry was something they really wanted to focus on. And it really came from one of our first pieces we wrote about, which is we were the ones who broke the story about Jared DeLuca and what was happening in Queen Creek. And from there, we kind of saw that we got a lot of backlash from people who were saying that, this is a religious liberty thing. People should be able to, express their feelings how they feel. And it kind of it basically led to, an entire project based around how we cover religion and its interaction within politics and the people across Arizona, specifically the LGBTQ+ community. So there are many ways to try to find accountability in these beats, but for the purpose of this summit, we really have honed in on asking 4 questions that loosely relate to each other. And of course, there are nuances within each one of these, but when it comes to the problems we see in each one of these categories, it really could be boiled down to the problem of religious bigotry. Some examples we've seen in this coverage so far. So we recently did an entire data swath of Peoria school boards. And we found that religious language was used to promote bigotry among trans and LGBTQ plus students 47 times across a couple months. When we reached out to the Peoria School Board, they would not, comment on this. Of course, the people who were the ones who were promoting religious bigotry were, they're not going to comment at all. But the point is that, every single time we go into school boards and we kind of analyze what's being said inside these school boards, there really isn't that much accountability when it comes down to the different elected leaders, like making action against these people. Some other coverage that we did. So I don't know if you all heard this, and actually the Atheists for Homeless group, which ones are you guys? There you are. So I think this is a story that we came out with in December. And for those of you who don't know what Phoenix Rescue Mission is, it's one of the largest homeless rescue missions, one of the largest homeless, I guess, resource group across the state. And they actually force their employees as well as their volunteers to sign a very biased or just blatantly discriminatory statement of faith. And a lot of people didn't know about that. It caused a massive ruckus within the legislature. In fact, the LGBTQ plus caucus decided to pick this up after our story published to kind of draft some legislation to fix this. But that being said, when you have an opportunity to do end of year giving, make sure to do it to the people who are not going to be bigoted against us. Some other stuff, and we haven't gotten to the rural part yet. This is kind of just what informed our initial reporting of the projects around religious bigotry across rural Arizona. But this is another instance where we saw that in the criminal justice system, the person who is supposed to be kind of like our biggest advocate, who is actually in charge of 2 different hate crime investigations right now, was actually seen at a Moms for Liberty event, which has openly promoted violence against the LGBTQ plus community, as well as silencing our community. So what have we learned? And this kind of go into a bit of a survey that we did. So we decided, okay, we have to go into rural communities across Arizona, and we have to tell the stories that are important to them. And at first, this was really just a survey, kind of understanding what people wanted from their queer news outlet, because there isn't one across the state. And it turned into something of a bit of a story project as well, because what we did is that we sent out we sent it out to 1,500 people. About 400 people across the state responded. We also hired a team of local ambassadors across the state to go around and ask people about their news consumption and what they wanted to see more or less of. We had people from Cottonwood, Prescott, Navajo Nation, Flagstaff, Tuba City, Yuma, and Globe that kind of represented the various different parts of rural Arizona. Obviously, there's way more than that, but that's just who we got included. The point was just to see where gaps of information were. But in the end, it also, because it was a bit of a sounding board on who was feeling what towards what issue. And when it came to religion, this is what people said about how they feel what needs to be talked about more. These are a select number of responses from people in rural parts of Arizona, including Kingman, Ajo, and Gila Bend. And I think the biggest takeaway here is that the news is not giving an honest take of what is happening inside communities when it comes to religious bigotry. The reason why I started Lookout at the end of 2022 was simply because I was working at the Arizona Republic, and they weren't using the words that my community were saying, that we are being targeted by religious groups. And the fact that when we were going to the legislature, there was religious language directly being used to harm us. And we decided at Lookout, when we started Lookout and we got the massive funding to kind of build it out, that we were going to be somewhat of a, we were going to be a nonprofit news outlet that was mission focused, that really focused on telling the stories of queer communities and queer people without holding back on what was actually being done. And that meant using the term religious bigotry in our news coverage. what that turned into, so this is the story we were talking about earlier. We were the first to tell the story about Jared DeLuca and how he was being, how he was being assaulted and harassed by neighbors in his own community for flying a pride flag. We were one of the first to report on the charity drag show in Cottonwood that was being targeted by the Cottonwood City Council, and how at the drag show they were actually picketed by Proud Boys and Christian Nationalists outside. We were the first also to kind of follow up. We really followed through the Cottonwood story. We focused on how the city council was then later charged by one of the drag performers for discrimination. We went to the Attorney General months later. They said they had no clue about it, even though we have proof that they actually received the charge as well as the complaint against them. Which is ironic because there have been a few times where the Attorney General has invited Lookout into the room to have conversations about how the government can better serve the queer community. And one of the biggest things is follow through. When bigoted religious people are coming after somebody and then there is a charge, made by a private individual, look into it. And so another thing, same thing with Cottonwood. So this is actually one of our latest investigations. So we were able to do a public records request on different members of city council, and we found that there was a direct relation between a very, very far right church in Cottonwood and two of the elected leaders in Cottonwood to push for the removal of Mayor Alinsky. So what does this really mean? And this is obviously based off of, my observations based on what we've reported so far and who we've spoken to on the ground in these areas and where we've gone to. And I preface this by saying it's only in a few parts of Arizona, so take this for what you will, but it seems to be pretty consistent across the state when it comes to issues in rural Arizona. We really should expect more religious movement in politics among rural areas. The religious bigotry coming out of local elected leaders, hyper-local elections being driven by a religious agenda that isn't consistent with mainstream views held by other religious people, more collusion between religious groups and politicians as the enforcement, specifically within the IRS, has been almost nothing. When we did that story about the Cottonwood Religious Church, we were basically told by the IRS, it's just not gonna happen. Like, ever since the Tea Party movement and the Tea Party backlash back in 2017, 2016, which basically put the IRS on alert of being discriminatory, they just don't go after churches anymore. And kind of the end result is we're gonna see more attacks, both online, within the community, as we've seen with the rise of the LGB Alliance, the Gays Against Groomers groups, which are aligned with Turning Point USA, another religious group. More attacks that will go against our community that will go uncovered by more prominent or even local news outlets, as well as law enforcement. I did want to end with one thing. There has been a couple of the first speakers spoke about hope. And during our survey, it was interesting to see that 95% out of the people who all responded, they were all tired of hearing about bad news. They wanted to know what good the community was doing to fight back. Unfortunately, this is the nihilist in me, this is the journalist in me. I don't have a lot of hope. But it is something to say that, for those of us who have the power to do stories, to do storytelling, it is important to give hope to other people where we might not have any. And because it may be that spark that needs to get things fixed. As a mission aligned, as a mission focused nonprofit news organization, we do not pull our punches, and we also do not hide the fact that we are probably biased, when it comes to queer rights. That being said, it is up to our readers, you people, to kind of take that flame and do something with it. So while we will be the nihilists and be sad about everything. I really hope that you all take what you learn and move forward in the future. So I'm happy to answer any questions. I know I have like 10 minutes left.
FYI, we have filed complaints against the Phoenix Rescue Mission with both Phoenix and Glendale, and I have heard back from attorneys from both cities prior to Christmas, and they said, we're looking into it and we'll get back to you in the beginning of the year. So I'm eagerly waiting for them to get back to me.
I will say thank you
about
for that. However, this is where the nihilism comes in. When we spoke with the Attorney General, when we spoke with lawmakers who vowed to do something, the reality is that we live in an America where SCOTUS has ruled that religious nonprofits are allowed to do this. Religious charities are allowed to do this. And every single time a state has tried to, or a county has tried to change their practices on financing or giving money to bigoted organizations that are religious aligned, we've either seen them bullied down, like we did with Washington Elementary, or we've seen them lose. So good for you for filing a complaint. I will love to see if anything comes of it.
So my question is, which attorney general did you meet with?
Attorney Mays.
Okay.
Hi, Ravon from the White Mountains. Maybe some advice. We do have 1 in 10 pop-ups in Sholo. The group is not allowed to rent or use any spaces from Pinetop Lakeside or Sholo. They do meet at the Unitarian Church. It's a good thing we have the Unitarian Church, or they could not come at all. Any advice on how to get our city councils to allow 1 in 10 to show up for our teens?
I don't have, I can't and I won't give advice on what to do, but what I can say is invite us in when something is happening and we'll cover it and we'll elevate it. One of the benefits that we have is that we are a wire service for the state. So when we publish something, we have partnerships with the Arizona Mirror, the Verde Valley Independent, about 7 other organizations, news organizations. So when we publish, they publish so that we get statewide coverage on something. So if something like that happens, or you have documents, something like that, leak it to us, or just give it to us if you want to be, named.
I do just want to make one quick comment on what you just said. Oftentimes, the media, the press, is our best allies in getting the word out. I know that's something that we've used a lot. Yeah, please give them all the information, because that is really the best way to get attention and shine the light on things.
I will say this, for example, the coverage that Lookout does is not being done across the state. An example is a story that we published yesterday about the Department of Education barring state employees from putting pronouns on their email signature, right?
Tom Horn solving the important problems with public education.
Right. So this was leaked to me, is given to me in an email, and the first thing I did was okay, who else is covering this? I waited hours to see, is anybody else going to cover this? Because we don't do breaking news. It's not our bread and butter. We do investigations, do accountability. It takes months to do our stories, and nobody was covering it. So I'm like, fuck it, we have to do it ourselves. And by the end of the day, still not one news outlet had covered that. So when it comes to these issues, specifically to the queer community and the kind of hatred that we get towards different elected officials, from elected officials, it's important that, I don't want to bogart all the information, but we are the only ones telling these stories.
Oh, I saw, yeah. Here.
Speaking of the education part of it, do you have done stories about, with the ESA explosion in Arizona happening right now, public money being able to go to religious schools that are legally able to discriminate, or not legally, but are able to discriminate against the LGBTQ plus community, and how that can continue and be changed, I guess?
Well, we haven't gotten into that. We actually just got grant funding to hire an education reporter. And so that is kind of what we've been focusing on as far as just hiring one first. We just hired our first health reporter yesterday. So, so we're still, it's mainly been me and an army of freelancers for the past year, but now we're finally growing where we can do it. That being said, it is something really interesting to follow because if you remember, 1 in 10 actually opened up their own school to kind of combat all of this. Now, that is not to say that 1 in 10's program is the best program, and you'll probably see us kind of like following in through with that to make sure that students that go to that school are probably getting the best education they possibly can. However, it is, you know, kind of a divot away from, you know, putting people into like religious schools using those ESA vouchers. And it's kind of, it's an interesting, for my own personal reflection, it is an interesting thing to kind of like say like, well, you know, school is unsafe for queer kids, let's put them in this school and take more money away from public schools instead of just fixing the public schools. That's just my personal opinion, but yeah.
Thank you. This is not a question about discrimination per se. It's a question purely out of ignorance. So could you help me understand the rise and adoption of the term queer and what it means or refers to?
Yeah, that's fair. Because I think many people who grew up in like, you know, the 70s and 80s probably heard queer as like, you know, a bad term. It's just been co-opted. It's been co-opted and kind of like been used as an umbrella now for people to kind of like sort of, I mean, people have issues with like the alphabet being used. And so, and instead of fumbling over LGBTQ plus or LGBTQIA plus or LGBTQIA2S plus, you know, there is the kind of umbrella term now, which has been formally kind of, not unformally kind of adopted by younger generations, of course, to just say queer.
I have a question that may not be in line with what you're talking about, but I'm a taxpayer. And there are certain places where I don't want my taxes, my share of taxes to support. Is there, yeah, I know, most of us don't. Is there any way we can dictate to the government where we do or don't want our taxes, our personal tax money to go?
No. There's this great movie, and I think about this often. There's this great movie with Will Ferrell, of all people, and Maggie Gyllenhaal called Stranger Than Fiction. And I will never forget, it's the long story short, Will Ferrell plays a tax man, and he's auditing Maggie Gyllenhaal because she is not paying the part of her taxes that go to war. And long story short, he falls in love with her. But that is a short and anecdotal way of saying no. Or you will fall in love with your tax man.
Well, you know, we have about 2 more minutes left. So my question, somebody just texted me from the virtual, said there's a TikTok guy and he said ligataba instead of LGBTQ ligataba. I would like to hear just, you know, I'm scared because of the reducing, the number of local reporters, you know, like I just read something or heard something on NPR the other day that talks about how, you know, we used to have this many reporters locally, then there was this many. And like, so are we like, what, are you worried about that?
Oh yeah, we're fucked. This is the reality. You know, we have 2 major newspapers in Arizona. Both are run by large corporations that have slashed, you know, their entire staff, you know. And then you have people like me hired from the East Coast to come out here and fix it all, and it doesn't work. And so then we end up working in really hostile work environments that really don't want to change, you know, the way that they do things. And then we say, screw it, and start our own things. And now we're having to compete, which is good. We need a media ecosystem that is vibrant and diverse and not run by companies. However, it also means that this is a plea for money. The news organizations that are popping up around Arizona that are trying to solve for the local news problem, the holes in local news, are all like us. They're all independent, nonprofit, and because we are nonprofit, because we want to prove to you that we are not bought, that we don't rely on advertisers, we don't rely on sponsored content, that whenever you read by us, there is no corporate entity or third party reading our information and going, yes, this is fine to say. That being said, because we are a nonprofit and because we, the public is our customer, we rely heavily on donations. That's the only way. For me to hire an investigative reporter cost me $125,000 a year. Why? Because there are no investigative reporters in Arizona, so I have to fly them to here from the East Coast or California and pay them those wages. And on top of that, because we are an LGBTQ+ organization, our base healthcare plan has to include gender affirming care, which is the highest, most expensive care, and we don't require employees to pay for it. So, and we are not the only ones that do that. Like, as I said. So, that being said, all the other news organizations across Arizona, the local independent ones that are trying to fill that gap that we're trying to fill, are reliant. So don't take money from Secular AZ, although I just plugged to kind of give us money.
They have enough for both.
There we go. There's enough money here for both. However, I will say this. When it comes to advocacy within the queer advocacy within the legislative realm, keep in mind that it is an election year, and our lives have now been politicized, like just as they were in the 80s and the 90s, right? Which means that we recently saw the demise of one of the largest equality groups in Arizona go under because they couldn't find funding. Equality Arizona went under because they couldn't find funding because giving money to queer organizations is political now. And when you give money to a queer organization, you lose Republican votes, or Republican money in the end. So that being said, it's a battle. It'll continue to be a battle. It'll be a battle for it's been a battle for hundreds of years. It'll be a battle now, this year more than ever, and in the next 10 years. So that being said, yeah.
All right, let's give Joseph another round of applause, please. Thank you so much. And to think I knew him when he was just a wee lad. Sorry. All right, let me get back to my slides now. Here we go. Slide, oh, I can do that now. I'm not as tall as Joseph. Okay, here we go. Oh, we still have that one. And first though, because we didn't have time, Ravon is here. Ravon, Brian's got the microphone. Do you want to just share a little bit, like quick too? Yeah.
Hi, Ravon Bowens up in Show Low. I was a Secular AZ member when I lived in Tucson. I think this is all about connections. I went to the American Atheist and begged and pleaded for someone to help me to help my Civil Air Patrol cadets, children who were being proselytized by Mormon prayers in the morning, and a queer cadet that was run out of our squadron. I found Diane. Thank you, Diane. We have protected my cadets, these children that were not protected before, but on the national level, Diane and I are still working with American United for Separation of Church and State, and hopefully nationally we'll be able to protect all the children across the nation. We're new, we haven't done much of anything, but we will be this month talking to the Show Low City Council about secular invocations, and Diane will follow up. So I'll try to keep you updated, but it's cold and it's winter and everybody's huddling in. Thank you.
Get it. Thank you though for stepping up. We really appreciate you. And then, I don't know, Mars or Whit, do you want to go ahead and talk a little bit about FFRF Valley of the Sun?
Thanks also, everybody, for welcoming me back as the president of the Freedom from Religion Foundation Valley of the Sun chapter. Thank you. Do we have any National Freedom from Religion Foundation members here in the crowd? I know we do. All right, awesome. If you aren't already on your local chapter's mailing list, please jump on that. Visit our website. It's Freedom from Religion Foundation Valley of the Sun. We are looking to do more in-person events, but we have regularly scheduled discussions that are about critical thinking. We give away prizes. We're having a good time with events while trying to improve our public speaking and debating skills and just becoming more knowledgeable. We're really happy to, along with the Humanist Society of Greater Phoenix and Secular Coalition for Arizona, to be part of the secular student scholarships that we're going to be offering for students that are graduating now this year in 2024. So we're also sponsoring the hygiene kit assembly along with HSGP and Secular Coalition, trying to be out there to inspire secularist leaders, students coming up to get involved in our communities and to give back to our communities, get involved in civic engagement. And so we're leading the way by having these types of projects and hope for students to come and get involved so that this type of thing will show up well on their resumes and when they apply for the scholarships through Secular Student Alliance. So if you have students in your lives that you think that could benefit from this, want to get involved in secular activities, we're here to support them in that and also to support the ways that they want to get involved. So bring your families on down. Thanks very much.
All right, so I am going to go ahead and do the awards portion, and then Diane Post will be closing us out with her legal report because we've been busy this year. But first, let's talk about good stuff, right? We have a few different people today that we want to recognize, and I'm going to go ahead and start first with Julie Sanowski. Go ahead. Whee! She's a school board member. Julie Sanowski ran for the Scottsdale Unified School District, SUSD, in 2020 and secured a seat on the board. A former teacher. You're also president of your union, right? And former president of her union. She advocates for teachers and has been standing up to bullies for the past 4 years. Remember, she got elected in 2020, and she's in Scottsdale Unified. And so it has been 4 years of constant harassment. Ms. Sanowski has a zero tolerance policy for hate speech and discriminatory proposals, with extremists spouting hate speech and targeting SUSD staff and board members at meetings. Ms. Sanowski has a strong gavel and does not allow attendees to hijack the meeting. So please, let's give Julie a round of applause. Sure, like couple, tight schedule, but you can do this.
Thank you all for having me here. It kind of seems like I've met my match with my interests here. My career as a middle school teacher really did prepare me for being a school board leader, especially here in Scottsdale. Serving as a vice president, coming in, following horrible leadership district-wide, I decided I could retire, so why not? And I need to find out where the decisions were most impactful for my interests. And I encourage all of you to do that. Define what your values are and then find out where those decisions are being made to make a difference. It's not about leading off of fear or anger, which we have been trained to do. So the whole idea of media, I've been searching for 3.5 years now for media interests that want to support the truth and identifying who our students are, what their needs are, and who our employees are, and what we can do to ensure our employees are going to stick around to serve our students in the future, regardless of their interests, regardless of what they look like, regardless of what they show up to school with. Okay, and so, let me be clear, I have never been a poker player, yet in my governing board position, I have to have the poker face because I do not want anyone who tries to offend our students or our employees of our district to know that what they say upsets me. I think what you've heard today is really important, that developing relationships is super important. You have to listen to and have conversations with people who don't believe like you, believe differently than you, and think differently than you. And it's a hard thing to do. But that's something I really encourage all of you to do. Our school employees and our students in our public schools rely on you correcting misinformation and intentional disinformation campaigns. If you see something that doesn't sound right, do the research, peer-edited research, please, and share that information with others. Don't just go, oh, they just don't know. That doesn't move our needle forward at all. That doesn't provide accurate information. I started my teaching career here in Mesa, switched to Scottsdale as my personal situation changed as well. Support the work. Don't just sit at home and support the work. One of the greatest things that Jeannie Castine has done has been to bring into view, at least my view, support of our district public schools and specifically our school boards. Prior to Jeannie's involvement with Secular AZ, I didn't know you all existed. So the more that you can, that I'm being honest, I do always speak truth to power. And I'm saying this because the confines of this room isn't going to be what's necessary to move the needle moving forward. It's going to get harder and harder to actually make a difference. Holding the media to the fire on what you expect for them to report on and what's important to you is so vital right now. Let them know what matters to you. When they report on something that matters to you, thank them. Same thing with all these other organizations that are really trying to embrace affordable, reasonable, equitable issues, whether it's healthcare, education, housing, public housing, people being able to put food on the table, whatever is important to you, thank those that are doing the work. So I thank all of you here for being here and caring about this stuff. Our speakers today were phenomenal. Thank you for providing those. And to you, Jeannie Castine.
Okay, let's get to the next secular superstar this year. All right, where's my notes? Here we go. So, and actually Joseph was involved in this story earlier this year too. The second person that I would like to honor is River Chinui. Please tell me I said your name right. Did I? Okay. Where'd my notes go? Oh, they're there. River is a non-binary teacher in the Peoria Unified School District. Last year, when students on a PUSD campus were promoting the Trans Day of Awareness, Mix Chinui sent out a benign email to educate colleagues about this day and how they could support students. Almost immediately, they were targeted, and their email was shared on social media platforms by evangelical extremists. Their name was pulled along with another teacher from the contract renewal list during a PUSD board meeting this last spring, and this targeting led to them and their family to be threatened by extremists, including vandalism to their personal property and death threats. They are currently suing the district and the extremist board members, and I am so grateful for their strength and their voice. So please, let's give a round of applause to River Chinui.
I didn't know I was going to get to say something, but thankfully I have a really good friend who said you might want to prepare something. So I did. Thank you so much for the honor of this award. I want to especially thank Arizona Education Association for their backing. This has actually been 3 years, can you believe that? In which we have battled for full equity, safety, and justice for queer students, teachers, and staff in my district, Peoria. You're not going to believe this, but I wrote this before we came, so you're not going to believe it, but I want to leave you with a message of hope, which is so me. But I want to leave you with a message of hope. Hope that as we continue to come together across all beliefs and experiences, we can build a public school culture where people of all gender identities are valued and respected and empowered to thrive as their true selves. Thank you.
And last but not least, we would like to recognize our Volunteer of the Year. Greg Jackson. Mr. Jackson only recently became involved with Secular AZ. In 2023, he attended every event that we had a presence in Maricopa County. His easygoing nature makes him easy to approach, and he helps Secular AZ sign up more members and volunteers than any other volunteer in our organization. I also feel incredibly lucky to call him a friend. So please, let's go ahead and give a round of applause to Greg Jackson. And if you'd like to and then keep your box. Do you want to say anything? Okay.
Hello, everyone. It's great to be here among everybody. This is my second time in this building. The first time was a year ago to come and see Jeannie speak. So thank you, Secular. I met Jeannie, well, let me back up. When she approached me about, come to receive this award, I asked if I have a chance to say anything, and she goes, we're gonna be tight on schedule. So I didn't prepare anything. So, so you get to hear me ramble on for about a minute. No, I met Jeannie on the campaign trail in LD2. We canvassed a lot together, and I can call you a friend as well, and I feel great about that. When I first heard about Secular, I told her, or Secular AZ, I said, that seems to cut across a number of things that I'm grappling with. I was really new to this scene here. So that I'm glad to be involved. But the main reason that coming from here, the main reason I'm involved here, Jeannie, I love you.
Just in case you want the box. Okay. All right. Yay. See, we get to end it with some hope today. And now y'all get to hear Diane Post, an Arizona treasure. She's going to give you the good, the bad, and the ugly of everything that the legal team's been working on.
Welcome, Diane. Thanks. I've been the legal director since 2016, and I do not intend to be the legal director in 2026. So somebody needs to step up here. As you can see, we had last year 63 complaints, which was almost, I don't know who's moving this. Am I supposed to be moving this? Yeah, you can do it. Oh, there we go. All right. We had 63 complaints, which is almost double what we had the year before. And as you've heard from all what's going on here today, we could have 10 times that if we had the staff to do it. We're almost double, thanks to Jeannie, who's been out there at all these school board meetings and bringing up these issues. You'll see that half of those complaints are from schools, and they're from schools because of her work and because of the attacks on our schools by the far right. This is the council we had in the previous years. Now we've had a lot of wins and we've had a few losses, and our losses are instructive. A few years ago in Dewey-Humboldt, we had talked them into getting rid of their prayer before their city council meeting and to have a moment of silence. But then they had an election. And what happened? The far right people got in again, and they started the prayers up again. So I've talked to the people there about how we're going to deal with this, and what they decided what they're going to do is run against them. So that's going to be the strategy, but elections matter and votes count, especially in these rural areas, you all know, where you don't have that many votes. And a few can count, a few can matter. So that was one of our losses this year. And the other one was, of course, the Peoria School Board issue with Rooks, who brought the lawsuit. But you know, this was well-funded and planned. by the national far right. So there wasn't like anything that we could have done about this. Most of the wins that we had involved schools taking down prayers and inappropriate things on the wall, charging churches less than what they, or nothing, to use the facilities when they charge other people regular amounts, taking down a banner, canceling speakers, that sort of thing. One of the most interesting or important ones, I think, was the apologizing that they punished a girl for refusing to say the Pledge of Allegiance. And this became a big deal. And when the teacher was reprimanded for this, she became so upset that she got sick and had to go home. Yeah, she did. That was pretty amazing. We did training at the State Bar Convention in Tucson this year, down in Tucson, I just said that. And you can see the title there. And we also had a good attendance. To have 32 show up out of the 42 that signed up is very good at a state bar meeting. And so it was really well done. We're working on one for this year's, focusing again on censorship in the schools, because we all know that's what's going on these days. And they're fighting with me. So we shall see whether who wins this particular fight. Now, we had a legal fellow this year. Our very first legal intern was Adriana Lujan, and she became our very first legal fellow that we actually paid. So this is the value of having interns and fellows. You know, 3 years later, she's graduated law school. Now she's become a lawyer, and she's still working with us. She worked for 4 months part-time, and that's why we could handle a lot of these complaints. Alliance Defending Freedom, which is in Scottsdale, has 300 paid lawyers around the United States. Secular Coalition has 0. We have no paid lawyers. I'm a unpaid, part-time, retired lawyer. And nationally, of course, you know, FFRF and AU and Humanity, they have lawyers, but combined they have about 15, all to fight ADF and First Liberty, and there's even more of them. So we need your support. We need your membership. We need your volunteering. We need your money. And if you don't have money, hold a fundraiser in your backyard with tacos or whatever, but we need it. All right. So when we had our legal fellow this year, she did a writing on these issues that you see up there, and she did a 3-part series on student privacy because of the issues in the schools regarding medical care and all of those sorts of things, and abortion. What privacy rights do they have? What must they be told? What can they not be told? What can their parents not be told, etc. So if you're interested in that, there are 3 legal articles about that on our website. And the Capital Times published 2 of our op-eds. One was on this issue with the pledge that I mentioned, where they punished a girl for refusing to say the Pledge of Allegiance, which is completely illegal. You do not have to say it. And also on the clergy penitent privilege, which you talked about down in Cochise, that whole case. They published it on that. And other things you've mentioned, we went up to Sholo, started working with that group up there. We went to Payson, Jeannie and the legal fellow went to Payson, worked with some people up there. And because we don't have the facilities to get to every single school board in the state, but we wanted to do something proactive. So we wrote up a very thorough, very detailed letter about what school boards and schools can and cannot do. We sent it to every school board in the state. There really are principals and superintendents and school board presidents out there who want to do the right thing, but they don't have any backing. Many of them were very happy to get this because it gives them some support. Well, I've got this letter. I mean, it says legally I can't do this. And well, the Constitution says, well, you know, this person says. So it at least gives them something, and we wanted to do something proactive and not just wait to be attacked. So we want to continue to do that kind of thing. And I mentioned all of this. And that's it for my report. So I guess, Jeannie, it's up to you. Unless anyone has any questions for me about what we're doing. Okay, thank you.
All right. So, first of all, again, thanks to the Humanist Society of Greater Phoenix. Thank you to Eric and Lindsay, our staff. Thanks to Whit, our president, Ian, all the board members. Thanks to everybody who was a sponsor for today. And of course, thank you to our speakers and everybody who won an award. And I said this at the very beginning, white Christian nationalism is the greatest threat to our democracy. And we actually have a Speaker of the House who hangs a white Christian nationalist flag outside of his office. He believes that I am merely a vessel to give birth to workers. And now we, like I said, have more religious people, more faithful people joining our movement because they're sick and tired of these Christian nationalists speaking for them. I want to talk a little bit too. You know, we've got to see some of these great organizations who are here, like AZELO and the White Mountain Secularists and the Atheists Helping the Homeless and Phoenix Atheist Meetup Group and FFRF and HSGP and all these great things. We, Secular AZ, are the more political arm, right? Like, you know, these other groups are doing great work with regards to fellowship and service and just, you know, finding your people. But we are your voice at the Capitol. And we have taken this fight against Christian nationalism beyond just the legislature and to our local government, like our school board and our city councils, because you know, as so many people have said today, unless we stand up and say something when we see something, democracy will just die. And so it's going to take each and every one of us to stand up and fight. And so I'm kind of preaching to the choir, no pun intended, because you all have already been involved with our organization and are already helping us push the needle forward. I want to give you just a couple of opportunities because I don't have anything really magnificent to say or anything like that. Mary brought up before our Substack publication. You know, there isn't anybody who's really focusing on school boards, and I'm certainly not a journalist, so no offense to the actual journalists out there, but it was, you know, a way for me to get that message out there. And since we've been doing that, we have more volunteers who want to do this work. There's another thing we have coming up that I want y'all to know about. Our Secular Day at the Capitol is going to be April 11th this year. April 11th, I think that's a Thursday. It's usually kind of an all-day event, and we're actually going to be at the Capitol this year, not near the Capitol, so that's exciting. One more thing I want y'all to be aware of. So I got a message yesterday, an email from a great representative from the Tucson area, and she wanted to notify me that January 16th is the National Religious Freedom Day. Okay, there's a National Religious Freedom Day. And I mean, if I hear that, I think, great, we should all be free from religion. But it's, of course, a Christian nationalist who is putting together the event and the press conference on January 16, 2024. And in her email, she invited everybody to bring their spiritual leaders and clergy to shadow them throughout the day, and maybe even get some, you know, points of privilege, floor time, you know, recognition. So I would like to invite all of you to reach out to your local representative, and especially like me, is anybody else here an ordained minister? There we go. Excellent. See, you are clergy. You are clergy. I don't know how long it took you. It took me about 2.5 minutes on the internet to get my certificate. I did it so I could marry my best friend, and humanist chaplain. So what I'd like to see us do for this January 16th, 2024 day, and Mars and some of the other, you know, secular leaders here are going to maybe try to squeeze in an extra meeting sometime next week to talk about planning for this. But I'd love for y'all to reach out to your representatives, your senators, and say, hey, I'm a member of the clergy and I'd really like to shadow you. You know, and if we could get a record maybe too of seeing, are they going to answer your emails? You know, it might not go anywhere. It might not do anything. Oh, also, is there anybody here from the Satanic Temple? Because wouldn't it be great if we could get some high priests from the Satanic Temple to volunteer? So please stay engaged with this group. Like I said, Mars has done an amazing job of herding all of us atheist, agnostic, and humanist cats so that we can do the important work that needs to be done to fight white Christian nationalism. And again, I just want to thank you all so very much for not only being here today, but for supporting us all year long. So thank you, everybody. Thank you for making our first in-person secular summit in 3-4 years a success. Thank you. That's it. Have a good one. And we finished 5 minutes early.